Did Bethesda put a loading screen in my intro?
Landing struts primed. Retros firing.
The intro of this game is a stark contrast to almost every other mainline Bethesda Studios game. Contrast to the Elder Scrolls and Fallout games where you always open with loud and bombastic clashes between political factions or important characters, where they take the time to show you about the world around you and drop you in the middle of an important event. This intro, in contrast, has zero exposition for the world around you. All of the NPCs around you refuse to speak to you, so you can't even find out for yourself. It has the game's one and only cutscene with really good dialogue between the two minor followers, Lynn and Keller. Many emotive expressions and animations which you will never see in the game anywhere else. The location you start off in is a mine, which both has no significance to the story at all, and you will also inevitably find it again. You want to explore to see if you've missed anything or if there's new secrets you just didn't see. Then you come to the realization that you are in an entirely different star system on a completely new planet you've never been to before. The game never shies away from reusing main story locations for the procedural generation of marked locations on the map. The cave also happens to look graphically appealing, but if you look hard enough you'll notice that it does that Bethesda thing where like half the cave textures are in completely different resolutions because they're using the same rock model, but sometimes it's tiny and sometimes it's 200% size, and you can tell that the texture is just blown up and is not the same density of pixels on your screen, and it's quite jarring. It is completely devoid of color. Every step of the introductory quest has quest markers every inch of the way. You don't get lost in a cave system where you can't get lost because it's one hallway. It even marks every single item you have to interact with and every single enemy you're fighting. Once you exit the cave, you fight generic pirates that have no relevance to the story at all. That's fine. The problem is, while you're fighting them, every single pirate has a quest marker. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna turn this corner. It's gonna be a gamble. Like, how many pirates are gonna be in that corner? But no, it tells you can see them through the walls. Somewhere along the quest, you'll find your first artifact. You go into this cave, you find some cool thing in a wall, shoot it out of the wall. In this introductory quest, you use like a laser cutter to cut it out of the wall, but you're not going to carry that for the rest of the game. Every other time you find an artifact, you're just going to use your gun and shoot the wall until it breaks, which just feels incredibly dumb. Every single room that you'll find an artifact in is a exact carbon copy of the same room. So like, now that you found this artifact, you found every other artifact except for like 3 or 4 that are tied to quests and are found in like specific interesting locations. You touch the artifact, you see some weird space stuff, and then you black out. The second you wake up, they'll ask you what happened, and then they'll never mention it again. No one will ever mention this event ever again. Alright, I'm gonna have to go on a bit of a tangent. The game is using TAA, or Temporal Anti-Aliasing, one of the worst types of aliasing ever made, frankly. A lot of people don't care. They look at their blurry, disgusting screen and they're just fine with it. I think everything on your screen looks a little blurry and generally terrible. This is why. I still can't believe some games in 2023 still use TAA. We have Starfield, Halo Infinite, Battlefield 2042, just gross. The game also has atrocious color grading. Sometimes you'll land on a planet and your screen will be so saturated and blown out, you think you're looking at one of those like scenes in Far Cry where you're high on something and just all the colors go whack, and that's not how the human eyes work. You don't just land in the middle of a city and suddenly every blue and green blows out. The game also generally performs like garbage. I have a 7900 XT and a 7900 X3D, and it was struggling to get 60 FPS in New Atlantis. And no, Todd Howard, I can't upgrade my computer. I already have a $2,500 computer. There's nowhere else to go. I'm already at the top. This game is optimized like garbage, and this is kind of sad that you would try to shift the blame onto someone else. Moving on to our character creation segment. Having a gender in this game is completely pointless. Every character you can romance is bisexual. There's no gender discrimination anywhere in this game. Like, the murderous pirates trying to kill you will even gender you correctly. The character creation menu is a bit weird. Every asset looks super generic, like it fits perfectly with everything else, except for two things. One of these things is a set of hairstyles that look like they just went into the Fallout character creator and just ported them to Starfield. Like they look exactly like 1950s haircuts. Like you'll look at this random person in the 24th century in the middle of a dirty combat zone after a battle or whatever, and they're just walking around with 1950s like curls. It's a little weird. Also, there was this specific set of assets that look very different than all of the other ones. That's just the grandma category. Like, it just makes you look super old, and that's the preset they used for every single old person in the game, just like they've done with every other Bethesda game. They have a whole bunch of things for every character that you could make, and then one single preset for every person that's like over the age of 50, and they all look exactly the same because they have one preset set of assets that just all go together, and if you put anything else with them, it looks weird. Another complaint I have about the character creator is that a lot of the main categories are labeled, a lot of the main sliders within those categories are labeled, but every category and slider has like sub sliders. Like, for example, you'll have one that says the size of your nose or whatever, and it has sub sliders for like the size of your nostrils and like how forward your nose is and how hooked it is and stuff like that, but they're all unlabeled. So for these sub sliders, mind you, there are literally hundreds of these in the game, in the character creator, because there are so many categories, and then all of these sub sliders are unlabeled. So there's hundreds of sliders in the character creator that just have no label. So you have to grab it and you have to move it and see what changes on the character's face, and that's frankly ridiculous. As for inventory management, stamina in this game, instead of running out and stopping you from doing certain things, it will go into a negative red state where you begin to take permanent damage that you don't regenerate that health. It grows faster depending how encumbered you are, and it results in constantly taking damage or stopping the game every 20 seconds, because this is a Bethesda RP, right? You're gonna be picking up every single little knickknack on every possible surface, and this game has a lot of surfaces with a lot of knickknacks, and so you're gonna be stopping every 20 seconds to empty your stupid inventory, because instead of letting you do that and just making it mildly annoying to walk because you're slow, you can't run, etc., etc., you just take damage that you can't get back without using healing items. It makes moving around the game and collecting things really annoying. And in Skyrim, for example, you had this loophole, which was the horse. You would pick up a million cheese wheels so you could climb the third of the world and do a TikTok about you dropping all the cheese in the game. But you wouldn't walk there. That would be crazy. You would get on your stupid horse, and your horse isn't affected by your over encumbrance. It would just take you anywhere. So encumbrance in that game was annoying, but you could just ignore it. Just mostly ignore it. There were spells that would make you move faster, that would give you more like encumbrance, so you could carry more things. In this game, things like that exist, but they're not common enough, and also you can't, there's no limit. It doesn't stop you. It just gives you permanent damage, and it's hard to tell when you're over encumbered until you start taking damage. There's one part of the UI which tells you how much you have and what your maximum capacity is, not in the inventory screen. It's also not on your HUD when you're walking around. It's in this middle menu that's just, you're never gonna look at that. You're not gonna read anything on that menu. There's nothing there other than that one piece of information. It's the worst place to put that. The UI in this game, confusing, and always gets in your way, and never has all of the information that you would expect it to have, it being an RPG. You kind of need to know some information. Like it's like, for example, if you play a game and this game has crit mechanics where you have a certain percentage chance of just doing double or triple or whatever amount of damage, and you just have no way of finding out what that number is, like, presumably it'll change depending on and what items you have equipped, what potions you've drank, etc, etc. You just don't get to find out because the game just doesn't have that information. That's really annoying. And another thing this menu system does is, in one menu, to move left and right, you press Q and E. In another menu, to move left and right, you press A and D. In another menu, you press left arrow and right arrow. In another menu, you press plus and minus. You have like 15 different menus where the button set to move left and right in that menu is a different set of buttons. What? That is possibly one of the stupidest things I've ever seen a game company do. You would just, you'll be in your inventory moving left and right, and then you jump into the ship menu to like manage your ship or whatever, and it'll just be a different button. You're like in the middle of combat and you'll hit the button to go left in that other menu, but here it's a different button. So you're screwed. This game loot has some weird mechanics. As usual, raising the difficulty of the game gives you a higher chance of dropping higher tier loot. But I was playing on the hardest possible difficulty, and I played 200 hours of this game, and I found 2 legendary guns ever, and they were not unique either. They were automatically generated. The big annoyance I have with this game is this is an RPG, okay? One of the most interesting things about the RPG genre is exploring the world and finding and collecting all the unique items. This game does not have unique items. They're all generic assets. Like every gun you can find, you can just make it. You can make it better. It's fine, that's interesting, but it takes away from the worth of unique item. And it makes it feel like I'm just hitting random on a crafted item instead of, you know, something actually interesting. There are, if I recall, 2 armor sets in the game which are unique, and that's it. One you can find within like 20 seconds of starting the game, and the second one you get at the end of the game. And it's not even that good. It's not that good. Like, you can just find things that are better than it very easily, long before the end of the game. By accident. You don't even have to go farming or looking for it. Just do a couple side quests and you'll just outlevel it. And also, everything you can possibly craft. Like, you'll craft the best possible gun you can have with your skills, and then you'll go exploring some cave somewhere and do a random side quest, and you'll already have a better gun in 20 minutes. There's no point in crafting. Getting random drops from random generic enemies is always going to be both more profitable, and you'd have more damage output by just sticking to random stuff you find around. You also have better chance of buying something better than what you can craft. You can max out crafting. You can find all of the resources for crafting. You can get all of the boosts, all the bonuses, all this and that, and then craft something amazing. And then you walk out the door and you kill the dude that's closest, and he'll drop like the best gun you've ever seen in your life. And it's disappointing for an RPG item system. Even if you have a bounty for killing the crew of a ship and then stealing the ship, every ship merchant in the galaxy will buy your ship. As long as you register the ship to your name by walking up to a ship merchant, handing him money, and being like, oh, I own this now. And they're just okay with it. Like, this isn't like a smuggler. You can go to the center of Atlantis, to the most reputable ship seller in the game, right next to like the police building or whatever, and there will be like a police officer standing right there, and this guy will be like, you wanna sell me this ship covered in blood, full of like 12 bodies, that's registered to one of the people, one of the dead bodies? You want me to buy this? And then he'll turn around and be like, okay, yeah, it's yours now. And then you walk away, and then you walk back in, and then he'll buy it. What? And when it comes to Shopkeeps, it does that thing every other Bethesda game does. The merchants do that thing where you will steal a tomato from some dead person's house 200 miles away, and then you'll like fly on your stupid dragon to the other side of Skyrim, and you'll go to the Markarth market and be like, shopkeep, I want to sell you this tomato. It's not like a special tomato, it's just a generic tomato, nothing to indicate where it's from. So the shopkeep will just know that you stole that tomato and you can't sell it to him. It's one of the parts where this game has a lot of parts where this happens, where the suspension of disbelief is just out the window because it doesn't take itself seriously. Bethesda games have this thing where they have a ton of features, and instead of making sure the features are part of the game world and make sense going together, like fitting all the puzzle pieces together, and they they're the same color and the shapes fit. Bethesda does this thing where like has two puzzle pieces and like they're completely different colors and they kind of sort of fit together because the shapes kind of align, but it doesn't, it still has a gap in between, and it clearly looks like it doesn't fit there. Bethesda just does that. Like they'll just leave completely unfinished mechanics in the game that have no connection at all to the rest of the game. When it comes to acquiring ships, you can steal ships by boarding any ship and then killing everyone on it, because they rarely have any defenses. Like I've been on the largest military ships in the game, the best defenses ever, and all you have to do is hide behind the crate and like corner peek over and over and just sit there headshotting everything, and that's it. You have a new ship. You're like all excited, you walk to the cockpit and you go to sit down in a ship that looks exactly identical to the ship you just had, the one you just boarded with. It looks exactly the same parts, whatever, and it has the audacity to tell you that you need a higher skill tier to drive the ship. What? I'm sorry. Oi mate, you got a license for that ship? You need a driver's license in this game now? I can't, you're telling me I can't just go up to this thing and hit thrusters on and take the stupid dumb steering wheel and just move it around? Like, I might not be good at it, I might crash, I don't care. I'm not gonna check if I know how to drive that thing. I'm not gonna have a license to drive a sports car. You kidding me? That's stupid. Sure, it's a spaceship, it's more complicated. I don't care. I've killed everyone on here. Just steal a ship. And now I'm getting to the captain's chair, and you're just gonna say no because I didn't have the right TV license. What are we? Why? What are we doing? When it comes to clearing bounties, you can find on the major stations and major locations in this game, you can find bounty boards where people pay to put bounties on people. You can just walk up to one of these and pay your bounty. What? That's not the point of bounties. Here's all of this money. If someone completes this bounty and kills this person, they're supposed to get this money. And the important part here isn't the money. That's not why this system exists. This system exists because someone committed crime or someone crossed somebody to such an extent that they had to put thousands or hundreds of thousands of credits onto someone's name just so they would get rid of them or catch them or bring them into jail or whatever. And this game just lets you walk up to the bounty board and just pay. You just give them the same amount of money that this other person put on your name, and that's it. You just get to walk away. Like all your war crimes are null and void. I can go down to New Atlantis and just slaughter every single NPC in the entire city and walk to the next city and find the closest bounty board and be like, here's a bajillion dollars, and then you're fine. Everyone stops caring. What? In games like Skyrim, it's always gonna be my example because it's the one I know the best. You either do the time, and with certain small petty crimes, you can pay off your bounty and whatever you find because there was just monetary gain from that. But if you killed someone, if you did something permanent that you can't undo with money, you have to do the time. The guards are just gonna fight you over and over until they put you in jail, or you kill off them. But that's a different discussion. There's no way around that. You go to jail, or you fight them every single time you go into Whiterun. In this game, mind you, it's an RPG where you collect random garbage all the time. You walk to the closest shopkeep, you sell all of your garbage, then you walk straight to the bounty board. Bam. You exploding that planet didn't happen. It's just gone from the record. Doesn't exist. Didn't happen. The NPCs in this game are embarrassing. Bethesda has kept this feature where all of the NPCs you walk around will talk to you. Like you'll walk into a crowded market, and every NPC that has a name has a pre-scripted voice dialogue line, so that you're interested and you go talk to them, will say it every single time you go to this place and walk past them, which is fine. The problem with Bethesda designs is that you'll have 12 people within 2 inches of each other, and so you'll walk through that crowd and all 12 NPCs they'll accost you with their voice lines to you specifically. Like they'll all stop having their conversations and interacting with each other just because the main character happened to walk through, and they have to interrupt everything and stop and talk specifically to you. The same voice dialogue line every single time. A lot of the NPCs will get stuck looking in whatever direction they were looking at when you come near and talk to them. So if a character's looking away from you and you talk to them, 50% of the time they're gonna get stuck just in that direction. Like they'll talk to you, they just won't be looking at you. And it's not like they're doing something else. It's not like they're in the middle of something. It's not like they're distracted working on some project or whatever. They just won't look at you. They won't turn. Again, it's in other games that just kind of happens every once in a while. In this game, 50% of the NPCs will just do that. They'll just get stuck in a direction and they won't turn to talk to you. The NPCs also have no sense of danger unless you have a bounty, because all the generic civilian NPCs know you have bounties, so they'll run from you. But the important part here is that if you don't have a bounty, you can take your gun out, you can threaten to kill someone within earshot of all the other NPCs. Like they're clearly close enough to hear you. You can point your gun at someone, threaten to kill them, shoot them, and that still hasn't passed the damage threshold to where you accrue a bounty, and then everyone's scared of you. So, fine, sure. Sometimes you shoot by accident. Sometimes you take your sword out and you hit a guard in Skyrim by accident. It's fine. Forgiveness for that kind of thing is fine because it happens all the time. Whatever. But the problem in this game is that you have crowds of people. Like, if you're swinging your sword in Whiterun in Skyrim, people do that all the time. Like, you're just practicing. If you're shooting a gun in a crowded square in the middle of New Atlantis, you're not practicing. That's not what's happening there. So locations in this game are divided into 2 different categories, basically. You have stations in space, and then you have locations on planets. And then you have major and minor locations, just like every other Bethesda game. As for stations, some of the major ones include the clinic, which is a giant hospital station. It's pretty cool. You have the den, it's like a den of thieves, basically. It's exactly what it sounds like. Then you have the key, which is a outpost specifically for pirates. It's much more dangerous. It's not just like, oh, you can go trade things there. This one is actually like, you're in danger here and everyone's gonna steal your things kind of thing. This is where you gotta sell things you really can't sell anywhere else, like that tomato you stole. As for minor locations, there's not really that many that are interesting or unique. Most of them are super generic and boring. Sure, they have their important quests or whatever, minor quests. The only 2 that are interesting are the Eye, which is where the lodge for Constellation used to be. Like, if you look at concept art and the trailers of this game, the lodge is in the eye. If you go to the eye, you'll find in the center, in the eye of the ship, just a completely empty room, which, if you look at the key art, is full of books and artifacts and paintings, which the only place you'll find that is the lodge. They just put it in a separate place for some reason. So now the eye serves no function at all. They had this really cool location. They had this cool story about how they've inherited this ship from generations of explorers, and they just made it a random building in New Atlantis. Instead of the coolest thing ever, a station in space that can move through a star system. That's a giant antenna, so you can find anomalies across the universe. And they just made them two separate things for no reason. So you go to the eye, you drop off your followers like it's daycare, and you just leave them there and you forget about them. And then you go back and they'll be there forever. And there's nothing to do there anymore, because again, the lodge isn't there anymore. It would have been much more meaningful if there was something interesting on the ship, but there isn't. There's nothing there. All of the key art, all of the trailers, everything centered around this ship specifically. Like a decade ago when they announced this game and they showed the teaser trailer of that station, it was so cool. It was like, oh, what's this interesting station? I wonder what it's gonna do. A decade later, when the game comes out, the answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Oh, do you get to help out with this giant antenna thing? You get to, search for things yourself? No. You go there, you ask the NPC, hey, did you find something? And he says yes. He marks it on your map, and then you leave. That's it. That's the whole purpose of the whole station in all of the key art and all of the trailers. You can go to a station called the Almagest, which is a casino. And you'd be like, oh, you can have a casino heist. And then you get there, and everyone's dead. And it's just full of, it wasn't pirates, it was these like religious zealots kind of things. And you fight them off. And you want to find out like, why did the religious zealots do this? Because you're like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they like don't like casinos and gambling and stuff like that. You're not gonna find an answer. There's no answer. You're like, okay, well, what else can you do at a casino? It's a casino, presumably they have a bunch of money somewhere. And so you read through all the computer terminals and you find one that says jackpot, and it tells you where the jackpot is. And then you go there and the jackpot has a code lock on it. And so you explore a little more, you find another computer that says this is the code to the jackpot lock. And then you take that code to the jackpot lock, you unlock it, you take it, and it's like $2. Not literally, it's not literally 2 credits, but it was the kind of money that you could make in a side quest by accident. Like, you could just pick up a couple guns and sell them, and you'll have more money than the only known casino in the entire universe has a smaller jackpot than random pirates in a random cave. Why? What? This is the biggest problem with a lot of locations in this game, is that there's nothing to do there. There's already nothing in between these locations, and once you get to those locations, there's also nothing at those locations. They look cool, but there's nothing to do there. As for locations on planets, 4 major locations, which is New Atlantis, it's the capital city of the United Colonies, and it looks and functions exactly how you'd expect. It has a lot of elaborate architecture. It looks shiny. There's a lot of glass and steel and concrete, and they have a council, they have a president, and there's a lot of things to do there. There's so many things. It's easy to get lost, not because the city is built like a maze, but because there's just so many things there, and there's no map at all to indicate where things are. So you have to go back to ye olden times of Morrowind, and you'll have to do some reading. You'll go to a town guide that's like a terminal, and it'll tell you all the things that are in the city, and then it'll tell you in what district it's in and vaguely what direction it's in. So you go to that district by magic. Honestly, finding districts is a magical experience because there's no signs. In some cases, you can go onto a train that will take you to that specific district, but like the borders between these districts are unclear, so you can just walk into a different district and think you're still in the same district, and you're lost because there's no signs. There's another one that's Sidonia. It's a Mars colony. It's a mining colony. There's a bunch of old war veterans there, and that's it. That's it. There's nothing else there. It's a giant step down from New Atlantis. It's noticeably like this is the secondary city of the United Colonies, and that's all it is. It's like, oh, we needed to add another city, and they put it on the map. They put a couple of buildings there, and that's it. Then we have Aquila City, which is the capital of the Freestar Collective. It's a western. You walk into the city. It has this giant like saloon-like door, and you get there, some guy hands you a shotgun, and there's a bank heist. At this point in time, you absolutely do not have the skills to talk your way out of it. Like, unless you've been grinding forever, that's not gonna happen. So what's inevitably gonna happen in the scenario is you're just going to knock the door down and shoot all the bad guys, and then walk out, and then you'll see this city that's like, it looks like a old western movie, cowboys, sheriffs, and everything like that. And that's what it is. That's all it is. I would say it's more interesting than New Atlantis because it does have, like, there are characters there that have power outside of the government, and they clash with the government's power. And it's a much deeper city because of how it's put together. It doesn't feel like different load zones, some giant nonsense MMO city. It feels like a city that makes sense. It has different districts. They all have signs. They're all small enough that you won't get lost. You have this giant building in the center that doesn't look like every other building in the city, so you can figure out where you are by looking at the building in the center. It's like a giant marker. It's like living near a mountain. You're not gonna get lost. You look in that direction and there's a mountain. You can't not see the mountain. You know in what direction you're heading at all times because there's just a landmark there. That's amazing. If you can't have a map, that's like one of the most important parts, is that you won't get lost because there's this giant thing telling you exactly where you are at all times. It's amazing. I like it a lot more. I hate the way the city looks. It looks terrible. The color palette is atrocious. It's brown and orange, and a lot of the city is just like dirt and mud. There's no like pavement. It's for a lot of the city, but like they just decided to not finish it. But it is well designed. You can find things. You know what district you're in because there's signs everywhere. Now, finding individual shops, that's still confusing because there's no map again, but it's much better because it's smaller, and that's a good thing because you don't have the city full of generic NPCs that don't have names and don't talk to you and don't have voice lines and don't have quests because they're not real. They spawned in that corner over there, and the second they pass that other corner over there, they're going to cease to exist because they're not characters. They're just set filler. In Aquila City, if I'm recalling correctly, you don't have those. Everyone there is a named character that's relevant to something. Most of them. I don't remember specifically. I'm sure they found a way to fit specific generic NPCs. But my point is that they're all shopkeeps, or they're all residents, or they're all relevant to the city in some way or another. Most of them are named characters, unlike New Atlantis. In New Atlantis, you have hordes of mindless, stupid NPCs that just shouldn't be there. Because you've made a city that's too big and you can't make that many named NPCs in such a dense area because it'll be nonsensical. And that's why you just don't make cities that big. Bethesda was going for a scale that frankly they're not equipped to do. It's like Windhelm. Is it Windhelm? The giant ancient city of Skyrim that's like supposed to be one of the biggest cities on all of Tamriel, and you go there and it's like the same size as Whiterun. and you go inside the city and there's like 4 houses. And then we move on to Neon. It's the cyberpunk city. It has drugs, it has crime, it has neon, it has the megacorp. It ticks all the boxes for the cyberpunk thing. But it doesn't do any of those things particularly well. With the drugs, you have one drug, not several. You don't have like this crime syndicate making illegal drugs or whatever to sell to people. You don't have all of these problems related to drugs. You don't have, all this poverty caused by that. You just go to this lounge and they sell one drug because they have a monopoly on it. And so all of the effects of drugs, most of the effects of drugs, is that they're dangerous and they'll kill you because they put dangerous ingredients in there to thin out the amount of drug they're selling you so they can make more profit, right? In this game, they don't do that. They have the one drug and it can't kill you, and there's no effects of it. Like, no one dies from it. You don't see anyone that has an addiction to it. It's like they took this thing that was like supposed to be edgy and be like, ooh, this is the dark, bad city of the world where people come to do, horrible things, and they just PG-13ified it because it's like, ooh, drugs are bad, and that's why this is here. Why are drugs bad? I don't know. The game doesn't tell you. It doesn't show you. It's not part of the game world. It's just kind of there. But like, it doesn't give you any example of why. What this drug does, it doesn't have any negative side effect. It's just another stimulant in the game. And the implication is there's a ton of people addicted to it, but like, that doesn't exist in the game. There's no examples. And then you go, the megacorp we can get to later. That's actually one of the major factions of the game. It's pretty cool. And then we have the crime. You go into the city, you're like, ooh, I'm in danger. People are gonna steal from me. People are gonna attack me for wearing all of these shiny, clearly expensive things. You even go to a certain section of the city and someone stops you and is like, hey, you don't want to be back here. This is a dangerous area. Someone's going to steal things from you. You're gonna get jumped, etc., etc. And I'm gonna guess how many times it's happened. I've walked around for hours in this area for several side quests and stuff like that. You wanna know how many times that happened to me? Never. Not once. Because again, Bethesda gives you the implication of things, but it doesn't give you anything. Because this city is not finished. It has all of these game mechanics, all of these lore pieces tied to these locations, and they didn't have the time or put in the effort to make them. They just made the city look like a cyberpunk city. They slapped a coat of paint on it and they said, yep, this game is done. Print money for the shareholders. And then they just walked away from it. Are they ever gonna fix that? No, absolutely not. Are they ever gonna implement an actual crime system in the game? Absolutely not. That's not gonna happen. Are they gonna add like drug dens where like people are clearly feeling the effects of this and like draining all of their bank account to this problem? Of course not. No, because the implication is what matters to Bethesda. And like, another example of this is like, you will realize throughout the game that like you'll be like shooting and exploding people and there's blood everywhere, but not on the bodies. Like there's this example in the game, the scripted segment, mind you, where you walk into a specific room that just has like a slaughtered body or whatever, and there's blood everywhere, and it looks really gruesome and it looks really dark, and then you find the body and it's just some dude in perfect condition. Nothing has punctured his skin. There's no blood. There's blood all around him on the floor. There's smears all over, the walls in the bed in the bathroom, but he's fine. He's completely fine. If you had a revive potion, you can just sprinkle that on him and he's good to go. He's not even slightly damaged. He's just sleeping. He's all good. And the city of Neon is cool on paper. It has the implication of being cool, but it's not. It's not. Then for minor locations, we have Hopetown, which is one of the major ship builders in the game. Like, it's a giant factory. All of the town is built around this factory. It has Hopetown. It's the name of the company plus town. I mean, yeah. You know what's going on there already. We'll get back to that later. Then you have the Red Mile, which is it's a place where smugglers go to make deals and stuff like that. Again, cool location, cool font on the front door, nice coat of paint. The NPCs are all in place for this to be something interesting, and you walk in there, and guess what's there? The implication of something cool. It's just a whole bunch of NPCs that don't matter. And then the one NPC that does matter, the owner of this place, May Divine, she coaxes you into running the Red Mile, which is a sporting event, I guess, where it's a giant obstacle course where you have to go to a certain place across the map where everyone can see you walking through this area to a spire on the other side of the valley. And it's just like death sport, so like all these people get to watch you run through this obstacle course and watch you die or not die or whatever. And then you get to it, the end, and you bring her back, whatever doohickey she wants you to bring back. And that's it. It was supposed to be hard, but it's not. It's not hard. There's a whole bunch of bodies everywhere, there's ammo, there's guns. All of the enemies are the same stupid generic enemies you'll find anywhere else. That's it. You come back, and everyone applauds you, and you've completed the whole point of that location, and you'll never come back here, because there's no reason to come back here. It just might as well not exist. And then we have all the NASA locations. These are pretty cool, because it does this like extended fanfiction thing, where it'll take all of the missions, like the Mars missions, where we sent rovers, a bunch of stuff like that, and it'll give you like how those turned out, like what happened to those, like what the future of those things were. Like they'll send probes to Jupiter and stuff like that, and you can find them. It's pretty cool, and they all have lore tied to them, and they all have interesting things. They all have plaques saying, this is the story of this thing. It's cool. It's pretty cool. And all of the NASA locations are some of the most interesting ones, because again, it gives you massive exposition about the world around you. It fills in a ton of gaps about what happened, because no one talks about it, and no one really remembers for some reason. Like, this world just doesn't seem to have historians, and I don't know, it's fine, it's cool. As for the third category of locations, which I neglected to say at the beginning because I kind of forgot, because they're forgettable, is what I would like to call the radiant locations. The automatically generated locations, in some of the major locations that there's already nothing there, right? Now, an automatically generated location, I'll let you guess how many things there is to do there. They're straight up garbage. You'll find nothing of interest in any of those locations. They don't have unique items, they don't have unique characters, they don't have quests. Every interesting location you can land at. Any location that you can't land at before finding it is not interesting. So like, if you scan a planet and you see 2 landing locations, there's gonna be something there. There's gonna be interesting stuff there to do. The second you walk away to another location on the planet, there's nothing there. There's nothing. You can fight a couple pirates, you can steal their loot, but you're not gonna randomly fall on like the tomb of Jorgen Windcaller and steal his stupid horn or sword. I don't remember what it was. You're not gonna stumble on these places. That's not gonna happen. You're gonna scan that planet and it's gonna tell you exactly where the interesting things are. That's it, it's over, the planet's done. If you want to explore, there's no point. If a quest marker isn't taking you there, there's no reason to be there, because you can make more profit at places with quest markers. You'll find interesting quests, you'll find interesting NPCs. In most AAA games, world generation like this is just cancer. It's a cancer on the gaming industry, and it should be treated as such. This is doing that thing in like Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, where like the worlds are huge and vast, and you have 3 interesting locations, and the 40 towers in between exist for no reason other than to run out the timeline of you playing this game. Instead of the game being 3 hours, like the story of the game amounts to, you have to waste the next 40 hours going to these 40 stupid towers for no reason. That's a wild tangent. And another comparison I have is it's like No Man's Sky, but instead of being a sandbox and adding the ability to make your own fun, they just forgot. It's not a sandbox game. The best way I can describe this game is that it is a game that is on rails with the world design of a sandbox game. So in sandbox games, the whole point is that you can create your own fun. Like in No Man's Sky, you're not going to find anything interesting. What you have to do is get with your friends and go to a specific place and build cool things and center all your resources around that and find cool things and bring them back. In No Man's Sky, you can make your own fun. In Skyrim, you can find fun by exploring and doing quests. In Starfield, you can do neither of those things because the game world is designed like a sandbox game and played like a story game on rails. So you can't explore to find quests, and all of the empty places are not places where you can do sandbox things. Sure, you can build a base. Why? Nothing's gonna attack you. You're not gonna play defense. There's nothing you can make there that you can't already make on your ship. You can just craft everything you want on the crafting benches on your ship. You can just have all of the storage you want on your ship. You can just collect all of your stupid followers on your ship, and if you run out of space, you just drop them off at daycare on the eye. There's literally, objectively no reason to make an outpost in this game. That function should not be in this game. It wasn't even good in Fallout. It's fine in Fallout, but here it makes even less sense. There's no point being here. I should preface this section with the fact that I am really good at this kind of game. Like, first-person shooters are really easy for me, especially in games like this where the enemies don't like move erratically, like in multiplayer first-person shooters. Their AI is really dumb. They'll just sit there and do nothing while you shoot them, basically. They'll shoot back, but they won't move out of the way. The combat I've encountered so far has been extremely easy on hardest difficulty. Every combat scenario is basically walking into a room, shooting everyone, and then leaving because there's nothing else to do there. In the entire game, there are only 2 bosses that I've encountered so far. And mind you, I've done all the faction quests, I've done all the follower quests, I've done the main quest, I've done a ton of side quests, and there's only 2 bosses. There is the Hunter and a scripted Terramorph fight scene. The Terramorph is solved by grabbing a melee weapon. That's the melee weapon you have, and just kiting around it. Just spin around it, and it can't hit you because it moves too slowly. And if you like get stuck on a rock or whatever, and it catches up to you in the middle of its attack animation, you can just, well, if you're in a low gravity planet, you can just jump over the Terramorph. In normal gravity planets, you're just gonna have to back off and try to get back into the kiting pattern. But it's pretty easy. It's also benefited by the fact that like the second you get in melee range of any enemy in this game, their AI just completely gives up. It just ceases to function. Like every enemy in the game, like you're shooting them, they're acting, relatively normal, like in Breaking Dead, Bethesda AI, and then you walk up to them with, the sword or whatever you have, and they just sit there baffled, like they have no idea what to do. Sometimes they'll push you back once, and then they'll just sit there confused as what's happening. They won't do anything. The Hunter is interesting. It's really cool. It's like a scripted sequence where you have to escape from him through one of the major cities, and it's done in such a way that like he's such an overwhelming force. Like he's such a ridiculous bullet sponge, and he like one hits you, so he's really just kind of impossible. I sat there for like 2 hours trying to kill this guy, and it didn't happen. Not because like you get to the end of his health bar and he won't die, literally just because I just couldn't get to the end of his health bar. It just wasn't happening. Most of the time, I would just run out of ammo. I would go to a different section, grab a whole bunch of ammo, a whole bunch of extra guns, and I'd walk back in there, and I would still run out of ammo, and most of the time I would just die before I would get anywhere near the end of his health bar, and it's fine, whatever. He has magic nonsense space powers. Ships in this game are a complicated mess because half of their features are amazing as compared to every other Bethesda game, and the other half fail at the basic features of spaceships. Your spaceship is like a mobile home and command center. Like, you can put all your followers in there and they'll sit there forever and they'll wait for you just so you can talk to them at the end of every single minor quest and hear their interesting, relevant voice line. And it's also your storage. You're never going to run out of storage, assuming you're selling things when you get close to that. And you can place a whole bunch of things around it. It's pretty cool. It's like a house, but you get to go with it instead of it sitting there and you never going back and hearing that someone stole your wife and kids. And that's, yeah. The bad part of this is the combat is dumbed down to 3 weapon types and 3 damage types. You have guns, missiles, and auto turrets. And those can either do physical damage, energy damage, or electromagnetic damage. Physical damages the hull. Energy damages the shield. Electromagnetic disables the electrical systems of the target ship. Every combat encounter is going to be shoot the energy damage until their shield goes down, then shoot physical damage until their hull goes down, and then you either keep shooting to kill them or you use the electromagnetic to disable their defenses and their engines. And that's how every combat encounter is going to go. It's just use one weapon, switch to the next one, switch to the next one, and there's no like patterns. There's no like interesting minigame to capture ships. It's just you just shoot them until they stop moving, and that's it. That's not really interesting. One of the most infuriating things about combat in this game is the turrets, the auto turrets. So you have on ships you have this energy mechanic. It's a slider that goes up and down, and the higher you put it, the more damage output or more speed or whatever that component on the ship does. And the auto turrets are controlled by a slider like this. So you might be able to see where the problem here is that you're going to want to put them at maximum so they do maximum damage, right? So when you near the end of a combat scenario and you want to capture a ship instead of destroy it, you can't just hit a button and turn the turrets off. You have to hold whatever button it is to drag the slider down. You have to wait until the slider gets to the bottom. There's no button, there's no on-off button. You can't switch between on and off. So you have to guess how long it's going to take the slider to get to the bottom before it stops shooting. And mind you, it's doing so much less damage, so it's not even useful damage. Just completely pointless. Like, something like that should just be an on-off. It's fine having the slider, but the slider shouldn't be the only way to turn it off, because that's frankly ridiculous. And your turrets will shoot anything in range until it explodes and dies and stops moving. They will not stop. Like, there's no setting, there's no smart setting that's like, hey, I want to capture ships instead of explode them, so stop shooting things when they're about to explode. That's not a thing. Aside from that, combat in this game has an issue that a lot of space dogfighting games and airplane dogfighting games fall into, where they just become what I call spin simulators, where you get into a combat scenario and the person in front of you doesn't want to get shot from you, so they just turn as hard as they can. And so you turn as hard as you can. Generally in this type of game, you have some ships that can turn a lot faster or a lot slower, so that spinning and turning segment gets broken up by one of the two failing to get out of the range of the bullets of the other one, or the one with the bullets not being able to turn fast enough to catch up to the other thing, and then they lose it. But in this game, almost all of the ships have the same turn radius. Sure, there's a mechanic where they have different turn radiuses, but it's not, the scale between maximum and minimum is very limited. So every combat scenario is just going to be you holding your mouse in that direction until you catch up, and then shooting them, and then they boost away and you boost with them, and then at the end of your boost, because it's the same length, you just keep doing the same thing. There's nothing to interrupt it. Missile locks, well, locks in general, work in a really dumb way, where you can't get rid of the lock unless you get out of the view of the enemy, which is fine, whatever. I'm sure spaceships in the future will have sensors in every direction so they won't lose missile lock, because that's stupid. The second they lock onto you and they start shooting, you just hit the boost bar, which is constantly regenerating, and you cancel the boost bar half a second later, and you've immediately removed any lock you've had on your ship. Like, there's no like, oh, you're getting further away. No, it's the second you hit the boost, you're disengaged completely. But their lock on you is just, it's gone forever. Also, it has this issue where while you're flying the ship, if you open a menu and move your mouse into a certain direction, when you exit that menu, the ship will jerk into the direction where you left your mouse in that menu. So instead of the mouse resetting to the position where it was at last, so it doesn't break your turn or whatever, it'll just jerk your ship into that direction where your mouse was in the menu for some god-awful reason. Another thing ships have is that they have 0 inertia. So like you can't drift in this game. What I mean by that is in this game you can glide. When you have the thrusters on, you can turn, you have your turn radius and stuff like that, but it follows a specific turn radius. Like you're not drifting, you're not sliding in a certain direction and doing a weird curve. Like it's always going to be an exact perfect curve. I don't know what the mathematical expression for that is, but you can do something called a glide where you just turn all of your thrusters off and you just keep going in that specific direction. So like for example, you either go forward or backwards. When you're turning, you're just going forward but turning, you're not drifting. So if you want to do that thing where you speed up to something, you lock onto it and then you kind of drift around it and you orbit it while shooting at it, you can't do that because there's no drifting in this game. Ships don't have inertia. The biggest problem I took with dialogue is that it has the same dumbed down baby dialogue of the Fallout series, where you can convince any character of absolutely anything with high enough skill within 30 seconds. Dialogue in this game, outside of the 5 main followers and major faction quest lines and the main quest, is as deep and complex as a wet paper towel. There's never any nuance to be found, never any conflicts of interest or complex choices. There's always an objectively correct choice that is always immediately obvious. You'll get to a dialogue tree and there will be 4 obviously wrong answers and there will be 1 obviously right answer. And you'll just look at every single dialogue tree and it'll be immediately obvious how to get what you want out of it. Like there's never been a single dialogue tree where I didn't know exactly what the outcome of choosing something was, which is fine halfway. An issue that a lot of these dialogue-based games have is that sometimes you'll click on something and your character will say something completely different, which has different implications than what you said. It's annoying. In that game, this doesn't happen. You'll say exactly what you clicked on, but, I mean, that's the good part, but the result of that is always obvious. It's super obvious every time. You'll be like, what kind of character is this? And he's like, he has this kind of motivation, so I'm gonna click this one, and bam, I got what I wanted. And it's not this kind of thing where you have to like pay attention to the lore or the story or like his secret journal or whatever that you found. It's always just tied to the main story. So it's like, it's very handholdy. And if you don't meet the skill or the requirements to the correct answer, it just won't give you the correct answer, which is fine. It's kind of an RPG skill mechanic. That's fine. But the second you meet that skill requirement, you've just won the dialogue tree. Like you're not gonna fail it. This game pretends to have stealth mechanics. So like, you'll be able to get abilities that will let you see through walls and see enemies. And there's a lot of sections that you have to like stealth through instead of shoot people because you're not supposed to shoot people for context or stealing things or whatever. There's no mechanic to distract guards. There's no like picking up a spent magazine or a rock and throwing it in a direction to like get them to move away from your objective. That doesn't exist. What this game gives you in exchange for that is something called an internal narrow amp. It is a quest reward that absolutely breaks the game. It destroys the narrative sense of every dialogue tree. It functionally allows you to mind control people, assuming you meet the skill requirement. So you can look at a person and you'd be like, hey, you walk over there, and then they'll do it. And that's it. Hey, you don't have to distract them. There's no like, ooh, what if this fails and they turn around halfway through their animation or whatever. And then in dialogue trees also, it gives you the option to completely skip the trees and be like, hey, give me this, do this, and they'll just do it. And assuming you get the internal amp and you have a high enough skill that's relevant to that dialogue tree, you can just cheese the rest of the game. So if you do this questline first and you do that and you level up your skills, you're never gonna get caught by a dialogue tree ever again. Magic in this game exists purely so the hunter sequence can look cool. There's no other justifiable reason to have it here. They've already stolen so many mechanics from Fallout, it might as well just be Fallout with the new coat of paint and space, and take out the interesting architecture and politics. And so they were like, what can we take from Skyrim that isn't already in Fallout and makes sense while we're still in space? And they're like, let's do magic. And almost all of the magical abilities are completely pointless and you're never going to use them. There are 2 or 3 which completely trivialize stealth. For example, the one that lets you see enemies through walls, which is you're in a space game. It's ridiculous. You couldn't do the Call of Duty thing where you have special goggles, future technology where you can just see heat through walls or detect sounds through walls or stuff like that. No, you just oops, magic. To get these spells, you have to go to randomly generated points of interest called temples. They're all exactly the same. Carbon cutter, carbon copy. You see one, you've already seen them all. You get there, it's like a cool building. You're like, what kind of puzzle we'll have to complete? Will this be an entire dungeon that I'll have to walk through to get the reward at the end? Will it be difficult? Maybe a quest line tied to this? No. Even better. The best Bethesda could come up with is that you walk into an empty room. There's a glowing point in the room. That's the only thing in the room. So you walk to it, you touch it, gravity gets distorted and you can start flying. And there's still nothing in the room. And then you see another point of light show up. And for the next 10 to 20 to 30 events, you're just flying to that point of light and touching it. And that's it. And then you finish the quote-unquote puzzle, which is just touching the thing that lights up. And then you gain a new power. At the end of that, once you gain the new power, you hear combat music. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is a trial that'll teach me how to use my new ability. Maybe the enemy will have relevant things that I can take advantage of with this new ability. No, they're completely randomized. These temples amount to basically a reskinned pirate that you have to shoot and kill. And now you are become Space Wizard. And none of the Bethesda games have a good lockpicking mechanic. I hate all of them, but there's something to be said that this one is worse. This one is just matching patterns over and over. So it's that little, bucket with the shaped holes in it that children have to match the holes for the wooden blocks and put them through there. It's very easy and dumb. You'll get to the hardest lockpicking difficulty, and it'll just be like 7 layers of pattern recognition. And it's frankly not that hard. I do prefer the Skyrim's lockpicking mechanic because even at the highest difficulty, you can learn through pattern recognition exactly what kind of actions you're supposed to do. So it's a kind of skill-based mechanic instead of just taking the shape that matches the other shape and putting them together. So you can take a single lockpick and break a master lock at level 1 with no skills the second you start the game, assuming you know how to. So it's an actual learned skill. Housing mechanic serves no purpose at all and doesn't tie into the game in any way, shape, or form. Your ship can already do everything a house can. There's no reason to have a house, other than role-playing. But again, you're a space explorer. Why would you not live in your ship? You also have the Fallout outpost building mechanic, which in Fallout kind of made sense because you had to find a place to dump all of your garbage, your mountains of cheese wheels. This game, that's already solved for you. You already have a spaceship that has massive amounts of storage, and you can upgrade the storage. So even if you want to keep even more mountains of garbage, you can just add to the inventory space of the ship. You have to grind a ton of resources to build things for the settlement, and it produces some resources, but you can just find these resources easily every time you want to use them, and they don't really tie into the game in any way that results in functional output, because you can just steal a random ship and that's already $1 jillion. You'll make so much more money in the 10 minutes that you took to steal that ship without killing anyone than you will building an outpost for 20 hours. Like it's a giant waste of time. And again, you're like, oh, it's gonna create resources so I can craft things. But as I said before, like, crafting mechanic in this game isn't very useful, because you'll craft the coolest thing you could possibly do, and 20 seconds later the game is going to scale up and it's just going to drop a gun that's just better than what you already have. In the quest section of this game, we have, let's start off with the Radiant quests. They're, as the title implies, if you know anything about the other Bethesda games, is these quests are procedurally generated. They serve no purpose at all, except for just to fluff up the amount of quests you do before you finish the game. The game would be better if it just did not have these quests at all. Like, if you just remove them completely, this game would be better. I found that some of the most interesting quests in the game were actually side quests, because you had choices to make. You had complex, nuanced decisions to make sometimes. And you'd find interesting things that felt like they came up with something interesting and designed a quest around that, instead of designing a quest and then after the fact trying to fill it with interesting things that don't quite go together. The most memorable one was a quest where you find a computer that NASA sent off to explore another stellar body somewhere. I don't recall exactly, but somewhere in the process the computer somehow became sentient, and now you have a certain megacorp in the game trying to recover the ship because it's valuable, and they don't really care about the AI at all. They don't perceive it as a real entity. They don't see value in it because they're just looking at the cold hard value of the ship. And so you have to, in this quest, convince them to not destroy the AI, and then you have to speak to the AI. You have to like interact with it and figuring out why it does what it does, how it feels, you know, what it thinks about its own existence. Does it think it's, you know, real and sentient and smart and useful and valuable? And it's kind of fascinating because like it's like a child learning its first steps, basically. You ask it like what its purpose is, and it doesn't understand what a purpose is. So like it exists and it wants to live and it wants to do things, but it doesn't understand that people generally frame their whole lives around a purpose. And so when you ask it that question, it gets confused and it's like, oh, I just do things. I don't know. The answers it gives are very interesting, and the choices you can make at the end of that quest line are also very interesting. I hope in the DLCs they explore this again, like it shows up again if you spare the AI and let it go, and etc, etc. It's kind of fascinating little side quest. Another one is you find a lost explorer ship that went into space hundreds of years ago and is completely disconnected from society, and for some reason it shows up again, and then you have to integrate them into society. So on paper it's cool, but in function it's not really well written quest. There was a lot more that they could have done with it, but they didn't, because the final choices you have in this questline are essentially kill everyone on the ship or enslave them all to a mega corporation. There's a bit more nuance there, but there's no solution where it's like, just why do we have to do anything with this? Just let them go back into society and figure it out on their own. Like, why do we have to do this stupid thing? They're just humans. It's not like we found aliens or something. It's not that complicated. And in some of these quests, in the side quests specifically, they take on the philosophy of imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. They take that one really cool quest from Titanfall 2 called Affecting Cause. At the beginning of the quest, you have this section and you gain the ability that allows you to phase shift into another point in time. It feels more like you're phasing into another dimension. That's how it works in multiplayer, but in single player, you're phasing into a different point in time. It's kind of like time travel, but the point is phase shifting. And this entire quest is designed around that. In order to progress the quest, sometimes you'll find locked doors, which when you just shift to another point in time, they're no longer locked and they're just open. And sometimes you like have overwhelming enemies that you can't fight, so then you can just phase into another point in time, grab a bomb or something, phase back in, chuck a bomb in there, phase back out, walk into another room, look through the window of that room, phase back in, and then all the enemies explode and die. And it's really cool because the whole section is designed around that. They have a massive feature that this quest was designed around. Bethesda designed the game first, and then the feature after. So, you run into this issue where this quest, Bethesda's version of this quest, you can't phase at whatever point you want. Like, you don't have a machine that just does that. You specifically have to walk to visible portals. They look really dumb, mind you, because they don't have unique effects. They look exactly like the little light beacons you have to touch in the armillary artifact temples. The level looks kind of cool. It is a bit confusing because you're kind of navigating a maze instead of a one-directional hallway. It's kind of unclear what you're supposed to do most of the time. All of the enemies you find don't interact at all with this mechanic. Like, you just fight all of them and kill them, and that's it. And at the end of the quest, you have this section that you basically have to make a choice of which universe you want to live in. And the only consequences of this quest are that you stay in your universe, where everyone in that station is alive, or you stay in this alternate universe where this person that you're helping, which originally died to save everyone, didn't die in this universe, but everyone else did. So you get to keep this guy he becomes a follower. He's not very useful. He just happens to be in an interesting quest. It is poorly designed, mind you. But the consequences of that are that you're no longer in your universe. Nobody in your universe is the person that you knew. They're literally new people. So sure, the actual effects of this quest are super minor, because the only thing that changes is, are those people on that station dead, or are they alive? But you are quite literally in a new universe. It is unclear if in this universe there's a copy of you. It doesn't explain that at all. Like, did the other you teleport in the other direction? Nobody mentions that. I don't think that's the case. I think this quest just takes that for granted, and you just don't exist in this universe somehow. It's kind of disappointing because it takes too big of a leap for it to make any sense. In the end game, at least it makes sense. It resets the whole world, you go into another universe, and everything is different, but you're starting over. In this quest, the end doesn't make sense. Because if there are two universes, there should be another you, but there isn't. This quest doesn't make sense at all. Think about that fact. Your suspension of disbelief goes out the window. It was kind of interesting, but it was really poorly written. For the main quest, you're essentially collecting the artifacts from the beginning of the game, and you're putting them together in something called Almagest. I don't remember how they pronounce it in the game. And you don't really know what it's for most of the game, and nearing the end of the game, you finally figure out that this is essentially a portal device that will take you to another universe. Nobody explains why you would want to do that. As far as I can tell, you can't come back to your own universe, so you have this device that can take you to another reality, but there's no real function in you doing that. Like, there's no, when you go to a new reality, it sends you back to the same point in time you started the game in, so it does send you back in time so you can rerun things and retry things and stuff like that, but there's not much function. It's not like not like a ridiculous storyline where you can like open a portal and like invade another universe or something, or steal its resources or duplicate things. You just go to another universe, you lose all of your resources, and the only benefit you have is that you restart the game. It's like a new game plus. But you lose absolutely everything. Which at that point, why? Why is there a new game plus mechanic? There is no plus to the new game. It's just a new game. The only benefit that you get as a player out of this mechanic is that the composition of the Constellation faction's members will change. There's like 10 different sets of constellations, but they're not very interesting. They don't really tie into the story at all. You'll go there, it'll be like, oh, that's interesting, and then you walk out of their building, and you'll be like, oh, that was it. That was the whole reason I essentially deleted my game save, just to see Sarah Morgan as a plant. Okay, why? And another point that decreases the value of the end game is that It follows the story of the Starborn, which are people that discover the artifacts, they touch them, they gain the powers, they collect them, and then they go to a new universe and they become a Starborn. So that means you keep the spells. That's what you keep when you go to a new universe. But again, the spells don't matter except for when it comes to stealth, where they're absolutely broken. But you go to a new universe and you have your magic spells, and that's what you keep. And they're really, all these characters are really dumb. You have this faction of Starborn that band together and are like, we have to stop people from causing chaos in other universes that aren't their own. So they like want to steal all the Alma guests of all the universe, stop people from becoming Starborn, basically, and control like the flow of that. It's unclear how, it's unclear exactly why, but whatever, it's fine. But they go about it in a really dumb way. They're like, we want to stop these like solo people from like wreaking havoc and stealing things and killing people, but this organization goes to other universes and kills anyone who tries to stop them from stealing the artifacts, and will absolutely break into your universe, wreak havoc, and just stop anyone in that universe from becoming Starborn, and then just leave again. So they'll cause just as much damage as if a single person went through. They'll probably cause more damage, actually. And the point of them isn't really clear. They just seem like they're doing exactly the same thing as the Hunter. The Hunter's a Starborn. That's why he has magic. They're both just breaking into other universes, stealing whatever they want, killing whoever gets in their way, and then going on to the next one. And they don't really seem to see the irony in that. So, I mean, sure, whatever, that happens in real life a lot of the time too, but it's just kind of annoying that your choice is basically keep doing what you're doing or join this organization with benefits on paper, but they never show up again. They're never relevant again. You can never, like, you join them on paper and that's it. Like, there's no mechanic centered around them. They don't have like their own, home ship. They don't have their own home base or whatever. They just kind of don't really exist on anything other than dialogue. It's really, everything about the endgame of this game is just really dumb. The story of finding artifacts is kind of cool. The way they go about it and the payoff of finding all the artifacts is just incredibly dumb. It's not really like, oh, what an interesting twist. I couldn't have guessed that. No, this game uses foreshadowing as like a sledgehammer. It's not going to hint at things. It's going to scream them in your face very loudly. Within 2 hours of starting this game, you know exactly what the end of this game is already. Like, if you pay even a little bit of attention, you know exactly how all of the story is going to go. That's a major issue with all of the faction quests and all of the follower quests. They're all horribly predictable and not really well written. I liked the side quests more than the main quest. Faction quests are kind of sort of in the middle somewhere because they just have more content. So as for the faction quests in the game, we have 4 major factions that you can join, aside from the main faction of the main quest. The first one is Ryujin Industries. It's a story that is kind of small in scope. It doesn't go very far. It's very interesting in its depth. You start out learning about a employee that was fired. You learn about corporate hackers that are kind of blackmailed into working for this corporation, and it's a ruthless corporation with no morals at all. The whole story revolves around internal strife and all the employees of this megacorp backstabbing each other. The faction has a lot of side quests tied into it, but they have super generic names and they don't really filter out, so they'll go into the side quest tab and they'll be buried under the mountain of the other 800 side quests you have. You'll just lose track of what they are because there's nothing indicating, hey, this is part of Ryujin Industries. You just have to guess that side quest about that fired employee has to do with Ryujin Industries, and you just have to memorize that somehow. The intro of this is a soulless job application. So like you go to a terminal and you apply to this job, and you can say whatever you want on this application. And when you get interviewed, it seems like they have literally no method of verifying any information you give to them. They just immediately believe whatever you say. Like you say you have 30 years of experience and you have a master's degree, and etc., etc. And like you just go in there, you say, yeah, I have that, and they just believe you. What? And you say, oh, maybe it's just a skill check. Maybe, no, it's not a skill check. You go in there You tell them the most ridiculous things they've ever heard, and they're like, okay, cool. You kind of become a corporate spy. Every single quest includes infiltrating another corporation in one way, shape, or form, and stealing something. And the major difference between some of the quests is in some of them you have to cause as little chaos as possible. So like you have to steal a secret without anyone learning about you stealing it. And in other quests you have to wreck as much as you can. Like just destroy everything in your way. And then you steal this thing and then you come back. It's kind of a... It was honestly the most interesting and well put together factions quest. Well, quest line. Because all the other ones go all over the place. They have a billion different things going for them. And they forget that they have to focus on something. Here's a billion shiny things. This quest was designed around a long saying about corporate responsibility and corporate greed and corporate backstabbing and stuff like that. And all the other faction quests are someone scrolling through TikTok. It's like, what? Oh, how can we possibly get the maximum amount of side quest level stories through your screen as fast as possible so people don't get distracted? And that can be done well. When I'm halfway through a quest line and I've been to 17 different planets and I've done like 7 different classes of quests, like I've done infiltration, I've done combat, I've done, you know, mazes, I've done, it's like this ridiculous nonsense. Anyways, my point is that Ryujin Industries is one of the most interesting factions. Now to contrast that with the worst faction quest, we have the Crimson Fleet and the UC SysDef, which are 2 different factions, but their quests are tied together and you have to choose one and help them destroy the other, essentially. The story is super interesting because as you go along with the story, you collect, you like arrest or capture people from the other faction. These people go into like a jail area that each of the 2 respective factions has, and you get to talk with these characters and follow up on their stories and follow up with their backstories and why they did this and what the context here is and what you're missing and what the nuance is. It's kind of cool. You actually get to see all the inner workings of these organizations through the dialogue you have with characters from them after they're extracted from their respective faction and permanently, you know, in jail. It's kind of interesting. You start off with infiltrating an upper class party where you just have to steal a couple things. It's really annoying because you can't steal anything in that quest. The second you steal anything or you kill anyone or you commit any level of crime, really, the guards immediately know that you did it. I think Bethesda looked at the Forgotten City mod / game for Skyrim / its own standalone game and was like, let's do that, but without all of the best writing in a game mod ever, without award-winning stories and dialogues and consequences. It's just devoid of anything interesting. But it is kind of cool. You get to see like how struck off the people there are, and it's like, wow, what else was gonna happen here? Nothing really interesting. And most of the quest is kind of boring. You go to the key and you find out some big story about a jailbreak and how that station got destroyed and how the bunker under it got destroyed, and etc, etc. It's fine, whatever. There's no real comment on that. That's all it is. The ending of this questline, however, is just the worst ever. You assault the enemy faction ship and or station, depending which one you pick, and it doesn't. It's like you join the military fleet in this combat scenario where you're fighting enemies and you have the same generic combat music you've heard every single other time, so it's not standing out on its own. It's all generic music, and all of the allied commanders that, mind you, all outrank you, all defer to you, and they all just do whatever you want. The whole military structure is just gone. It's just like, oh, you're the main character? Oh, you're basically God. And the story just revolves around you in a really obvious and dumb way. The interesting part about this battle is that they have giant defense batteries that shoot giant lasers that explode you immediately. The problem is that you can just kite them. They will never shoot you if you don't stop moving. They're really easy to deal with. And they're all far enough that when you're fighting one, the other ones won't attack you. so they have no overlapping coverage. None of the combat dialogue is relevant at all. It's just people screaming at each other. And once you disable all the defenses, you disable the batteries, you land on the ship/station, you get there, you're like, ooh, this is gonna be interesting, like invasion scene, like they do in Skyrim, where like you have a bunch of legion of people just attacking city. They just don't do that in this game. They just felt like not doing it this time. You land, you go in, segment is just you fighting the entire station/ship command on your own. You fight everyone, you kill everyone, you deal with the consequences, you walk out, and then as you're walking out, all of the soldiers will come in and arrest the consequences of your actions. And then you walk out, and that's it. The final reward you get is either the pirates steal the giant money cache that you gave them and disappear, or the military takes it from you and says, hey, cool, thanks, and then they give you a minor amount of it, like a super tiny, like 0.1% of it, which again, you stealing a random ship and selling it is going to be more than that, so this whole quest line amounts to absolutely nothing in return. So the next faction we have is the UC Vanguard. It's the army/defense force/police force of the United Colonies. Its quest line is very strange. It definitely has the most like Star Wars-esque wacky storyline, where you go across the galaxy and you find radically different quests all tied together by a ridiculous chain of events. You have to deal with the president and the council and their stupid political intrigues. You have to deal with the fact that they are harboring a war criminal, but secretly, like it was supposed to be executed years ago, but they kept him in a secret prison under the main building because he's very smart or something like that. And you also have to deal with some old war veterans on Mars. You have to deal with the fact that this war criminal dude has a daughter, but she's a clone of him, so technically they're the same person, but she's female, but she doesn't know he exists, like he's alive anymore. And it all revolves around the Terramorphs, and they're suddenly starting to spawn around the universe again. They don't quite know how these monsters propagate. They don't know how they suddenly appear on planets. And eventually you figured out you can't fight these things because they multiply too quickly. That's how the story frames this. So you can't go out and do it yourself. You can't just kill these things, despite you having killed dozens of them, presumably by this point in time in the story. So the game gives you two options. After you discover how they propagate, you can genetically engineer a pathogen or virus, or I don't remember exactly what it was, that will spread throughout every organism on every planet and will, in theory, only kill the Terramorphs and what they come from, and so they don't turn into Terramorphs, and etc, etc. And it's like, what? So wait, let me get this straight. You want me to release this pathogen, which only kills one thing, in theory, on paper, but we also have no time to test this and its effects on the ecosystem. And we also are just going to assume it's not going to mutate and kill anything else, ever. Because presumably if it is good at propagating, it has a way to survive long enough to propagate. In theory, it'll be quite resilient and it won't go away. So whatever, that seems like a terrible, terrible idea. And then on the other hand, you have this ridiculous choice. There's like this natural enemy of the Terramorphs, which is this giant like giraffe height animal, but it's as thick as like an elephant. So just take an elephant and stretch it upwards, and that's what this thing looks like basically. It's huge and it's thick, and it's covered in armor pieces, and it's really good at fighting Terramorphs. Mind you, the important part here is that it's huge and heavy and good at combat, and they want to have these things breed and have an army of them across the galaxy. So mind you, not only are you waiting for these things to breed and grow big enough to use them, you also have to create the infrastructure on every planet, on every colony, on every police forces / vanguard's station in order for them to be effective. But they're huge, heavy, so it's really hard to transport them, it's really hard to feed them, It's really hard to maintain them. I mean, sure, they're docile, but they're huge. They can accidentally lean in your direction and explode your lungs. This story was really out there. It was fine. It would have been better if it made more sense. But all the individual pieces on their own are pretty cool. They were just kind of... It seems like they were just kind of stuck together for no particular reason other than they just didn't know what to do with them. The last faction as a quest line in the game we're talking about is the Freestar Rangers, which is the military/police force of the Freestar Collective. Its storyline is interesting. It's not bad, it's not good, it's fine. It does lead you across the galaxy again, just like the Vanguard questline, because also it's one of the major countries' factions, and you'll be dealing with a lot of guns and cowboys and a minor story around one of your followers. It'll give you a lot of exposition on history. It'll teach you about the war that caused the current armistice and how it came to be, and a whole bunch of other political machinations. It shows you more information about the Freestar Collective and how their government is structured. It shows you that they're ruled by the Council of Governors, which we'll get back to. But you start this quest line with the bank robbery that I think I mentioned earlier in the video. Then you go to a farm just in the middle of nowhere, and you fight off some pirates that want to kill the person and steal the farm. Then you go to a factory of one of the major shipbuilders, and you ask them like what's going on, because they own the area, because it's the area under the jurisdiction of President Ron Hope, one of the 4 counselors and leader of Hopetown. We'll get back to him later. Then we go to Neon, which I've already complained about a lot, the clinic, which I've mentioned, the hospital station. Then we have the Red Mile, which I've also mentioned, and the Fortuna. If I recall correctly, this is a museum ship. It's like a private museum ship, like some guy just likes collecting things. And so you go on there and you find a whole bunch of fascinating things. I mean, that's it. There's nothing else there. It's just kind of fascinating. There's no real story or lore on that ship itself. You kind of just talk to this intriguing man, and then you either steal the thing you're looking for, which is another one of the generic artifacts, or you just convince him to give it to you, or you buy it from him, or you just kill him and you destroy the ship, steal the artifact. The most interesting part of this, however, is the first bunker. It's just called the first bunker. The first was some sort of subdivision of the Freestar Collective's military. They were disbanded because of war crimes. So they signed the armistice, but the commander of the first just kind of felt like still fighting. So they continued to kill enemies. I believe they also killed civilians and stuff like that. They would just kind of walk over anything that was in front of them. And so you get to delve into the story of this very important military faction and how they're disgruntled because they were disbanded and nobody, cares about their achievements. It's one of those interesting reminders sometimes that unfulfilled desires are one of the most important human motivations ever. They'll cause people to do horrendous things, especially when they're tied to some sort of like inferiority complex. Like, for example, this military faction thinks that people think they're lesser than the United Colonies because they quote unquote lost the war, because they thought they were in a position to win the war, and instead they signed a peace treaty to make peace. But these guys just kept wanting to fight and fight and fight and fight and do horrendous things and thought nobody would stop them, and then they were stopped, but not in the correct way. So now you have this giant military faction that is disgruntled. You already have a government structure that is mostly unfunctional, so it just kind of lets people do whatever they want. Won't get in the way of people having their own militias and stuff like that. So this military faction just kind of holds up in their bunker and no one can stop them because they're a giant military force, and every other military force just kind of stopped existing after the war because, again, the Freestar Collective kind of doesn't exist. Because the Freestar Collective is functionally a giant funnel of money going from everyone that lives there to the Council of Governors specifically. This is run like I don't remember what the word is called, but it's run by people that have money. There's no like government support for the poor or poverty or healthcare or anything like that. It's just kind of a country that exists purely so that nobody can tax these mega corporations or these giant establishments. It exists purely to defend the rich from paying taxes. Literally, like, there's no other functional reason this country exists. So now we go on to the actual Council of Governors and explaining, their different components and how they function, and the corrupt leaders of the Freestar Collective. They're all in it for personal gain. It's very obvious. The first one is, as I mentioned, President Ron Hope of Hopetown. He constantly gaslights his employees, makes them fight each other so that they don't fight him. He'll sell defective goods and then blame it on other people, and there's nobody that can stop him because he's the president. Who's gonna stop him? It's not, people don't vote for the counselors. The counselors win by having money, and he is the president of the biggest shipbuilding company, right? So you can't do anything about it. He just has money, and thus he's a counselor. That's it. You can't do anything against him. You can't arrest him because he is the law. You can't get rid of him because he has an army of armed guards. It's kind of how some countries work, where like nobody has an income except for the army and the military and the police, because they're the people who control the power and make sure people abide by the rules, but nobody else is getting any money or payment or food or whatever. It's a very dysfunctional kind of company and country, really, because the whole country is kind of run like that. And in recent time, he is selling defective fertilizers, which will ingrain into the ground and slowly consume all of the materials in the soil, making it completely useless for planting plants. And eventually it'll turn into some sort of ore or resource, I don't remember exactly what it was, that he can use for shipbuilding. So he's destroying people's farms by selling them something. So he's already profiting on selling them a product. He is the sole provider of this product because he's a counselor. Who else are you gonna buy from? And once that ore grows, you can no longer plant anything in the ground. Your farmland is ruined. So either you go bankrupt and he buys your farmland, or you refuse to buy his products, and then eventually he just has a mercenary group forcibly remove you, and he quote-unquote buys it from you. So then he gets to keep the land to build more things on, like more factories and blah blah blah, but also gets to mine this ore that's very valuable for shipbuilding. He's conning this entire population for a profit. Then we go on to Administrator Benjamin Bayou of Neon. I've already touched on Neon a lot before. He will like insert himself into companies as like a board member, or he will just forcibly take over companies and become the CEO, and he'll like take bribes from every company there and let them do whatever they want as long as they pay him. One example that he has is that he put his brother into the CEO position of a major manufacturing company. I recall them being related to science and inventing things, but the problem is that his brother knows absolutely nothing about this, so he can't help with, making the products. He doesn't understand the products at all, and his brother is kind of already reluctant. He doesn't want to do this position, but he just kind of forced both him and the company to accept it. He's also the sole provider of the only legal drug, so everyone that buys the drug is paying him directly, essentially. He also takes bribes from all the bandit factions, and he's not very interesting. It's not very complex like Ron Hope is it goes into something. Benjamin Bayou is just a corrupt governor. He just steals everything he can. Then we go on to Mayor Elias Cartwright of Aquila City. He cares little for solving the problems of Aquila City. The city has a ton of poverty, and he doesn't do anything about it. He'll like donate a really small amount of money to several like food banks, but he won't do anything about the problem. He'll just give enough money so that people can say, hey, he gave money to this food bank. Not only is it not enough money for this food bank to function, it's not, he's not doing anything. He's just sitting in Aquila City and doing the absolute minimum possible so that he stays the mayor and just makes profit off of, you know, taxes and whatnot, and his own personal businesses. He's kind of the only rich person in Aquila City. Later on you get to find out why. For example, another rich person bought up some old house somewhere in Aquila City and has moved into Aquila City, and he sees it as a threat because this person has as much money or more money as he does. And this person doesn't seem at all interested in fighting with Cartwright or joining the Council of Governors. He just kind of wants to live in his nice ancient home and just do his business or whatever. But Cartwright sees this as such a threat that he forces the city to acknowledge that this house is like an ancient relic, like a historical site, so no one's allowed to live there. And so he kicks him out, like certain countries do a lot, where they're like, oh, this whole section of land is a historical artifact, nobody can live here, and then they kick everyone out. And then they, a couple months later, just take off the designation and people can live there again. But now the person that kicked him off can now sell it to whoever they want. So not only does he get the profit of that, he also gets to choose who gets to live there. Whatever, that was a weird tangent, but yeah, it's just, I find that really annoying. And he'll constantly use the past history of Aquila City against people. Aside from all the problems he's just not solving in Aquila City. Then we have Dr. Laura Darvish of the clinic. It is a private healthcare hospital, not funded by the government, because God forbid the Freestar Collective makes any public institutions. Those don't exist here. And you think, oh, a hospital owner has to be nice, they're helping people, whatever. But no. So the hospital is divided into two sections. You have the private section, which is dedicated to VIPs and high-paying customers and corporations, corporate clients, where they get a lot of money from. In several quest lines, you get these really rich mercenary or pirate leaders that are absolutely covered in bounties, but in the VIP section, you get complete privacy. So you could be the world's biggest war criminal, and this hospital doesn't care who you are. You just walk in, you throw money at them, and into the VIP section you go, and nobody knows you were there. Which I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like regardless of who you are, hospitals should help you. Even if you're the worst person ever, like, you should still have access to hospitals. Mind you, in this case, you have to throw mountains of money at them. But I don't know, I'm kind of conflicted about that part. Where, like, it doesn't matter who you are, you get healthcare. That's kind of a good thing. Ideally, you don't have to pay for it at all. But, you know, whatever. We'll take it where we can. And the other half of the hospital is where the low-paying customers go. You still have to pay, but you get bad treatment, and the corporations contract the hospital to do illegal experiments on these low-paying customers. So, if you walk in that door with a slightly too small stack of cash, there's a pretty good chance that some horrible, immoral megacorp is running some sort of medical experiment on you, which that's just kind of sad that you could have had. Okay, so one of the major reasons for the war was because both of these factions were expanding at the same time, and eventually they built a station with no colonies other than the station in that solar system, if I recall correctly. And so nobody was able to claim it because you can't claim stations or whatever. At that point in time, they didn't have the political rigor to say things not on ground are land that nations can own. And this wasn't a military station, it was just a hospital. And so this hospital was right smack in the middle of these two factions. It was a private hospital at that point still, if I recall correctly. Both of these factions wanted to say, hey, this is ours now. The UC, because it's one of the biggest hospitals in the galaxy, they want to do the thing the United Colonies would do and provide healthcare like any rational government would. And the I almost said the Council of Governors, no, the Freestar Collective wanted it to run experiments on people and profit. And so one of the major reasons they went to war, not the main reason, just one of the parts of this machine that caused the war, was them wanting this hospital and fighting over this hospital. And so the Freestar Collective eventually won and took the hospital for themselves. So it continues to function in this horrendous way where they profit off of you regardless if you give them money or not, because the product in the end isn't the money you give them. The product in the end is you. You are the product. That's kind of sad and terrifying. And those are the four counselors of the Council of Governors of the Freestar Collective. And frankly, when I look at the Freestar Collective, I see a bunch of idiots want to make profit and don't like taxes and want to commit horrendous things without anyone stopping them. A bunch of idiots just following them into the orphan grinding machine. And it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you willingly part of this horrendous machine of empire that exists purely to funnel your taxes into a military force big enough to stop people from letting the powerful do whatever they want? They provide you nothing else. You don't get healthcare. You don't get food banks that function. You don't get anything else. The government provides you with absolutely nothing. But people look at it and say, oh, taxes are low. Are you kidding me? What? That's crazy. Are you dumb? This country exists purely so that the people with enough money can build a military big enough to stop other people from stopping them from stealing and harassing and abusing their entire population. That's the whole reason this country exists. And you cannot look at it any other way, because that's how the government is structured. That's how every questline for the Freestar Rangers and the Freestar Collective plays out. Because every person in government has mountains of cash. And you don't get mountains of cash by being a good person. Doesn't happen. It can happen because other political machinations will benefit off of it. But in this case, that's not the truth. Here, they're specifically made and designed for profit. Long story short, I hate the Freestar Collective, and they're all stupid. And your capital city doesn't have paved roads because you don't pay taxes. Just think about that for a second, okay? Just do the math there. And now we move on to the second most important section of the video. Second most important because Bethesda is only good at doing two things. They have the overall narrative world building, where you have these giant bombastic stories that are never very complex, but they go all over the place. And they're huge and they're long, but they're never very deep. And the same kind of applies to the followers. The other good thing they're good at doing, where you have a wide range of followers in every Bethesda game, that they all have their own functions and their own stories tied to them, and they all integrate into the story in one way or another. They're not very deep, but they are interesting enough that you are interested in them. So it's kind of this middle ground between the generic RPG where you won't care about any characters, and the complete opposite end where you have the Baldur's Gate 3 and the Mass Effects. So it's right in the middle of these two sections. It's not you'll care about characters enough, but they're not deep enough for you to explore a single character for 100 hours, like you can in Baldur's Gate. But back then, in 2001 with Morrowind, or 2006, I think, with Oblivion, they were pretty good. By the time we had Skyrim, we already had, you know, the Mass Effects and the Dragon Ages, so there were other things that did the Bethesda follower thing better, but there was still nothing competing with the grand narrative story that they have. Because like a Mass Effect has a very linear story that starts and ends somewhere, and there's not much outside of that. There's no side stories, they don't go anywhere else with it. In Bethesda games, you can branch off and go into a random direction and find a quest tied to the main quest. One thing I will say that they improved with the followers in this game is the voice acting. It's actually really good, mostly because it's no longer just the one guy that does the voice for every single Nord, and then Todd Howard doing the voice for several races and doing the sound effects with his mouth. It's no longer a very small voice acting team. Every single named character has their own voice actor, and they're all actually pretty good. And it's kind of interesting. It adds another layer of depth to all the characters. Again, many game series have done this and have done this much better since then. Is this game is a game designed for about when Skyrim came out. Bethesda has this issue where their games and their game designs are always, I'd say, somewhere between 5 to 10 years too late. Skyrim would have done a lot better in 2007, and instead it came out in 2011. Starfield would have done a lot better in 2011 instead of 2023, which, oh god, that's 12 years. That's not less than 10, that's 12. Oh god, whatever. The only thing that's better than a game designed in 2011 is the quality of the graphics. But everything else it's outdated. I keep going on tangents. I'm sorry. I have to complain about this game so much that I can't stay on topic. Let's go through the followers. In this game, they're called companions for some reason, despite them being called followers in every other Bethesda game that I can recall. Bethesda Studios game, not games they've published, games they've made themselves. As I mentioned, with the opening of the game, you have really deep, interesting scripted dialogue where characters will emote a lot and they'll look, you know, human, and they'll look in different directions and they'll actually interact with each other, and you can read their facial expressions, and there's more depths of layer to the communication between those two characters in the intro, and that's the only point in time where you'll see that. The rest of the time, the only thing holding up the story is the voice acting. Everything about it is brain dead, except for the voice acting and the intro. Aside from that, you have a long list of like 32 followers, and only about 6 or 7 of them are actually meaningful or matter at all. You have Vasco, Barrett, Andreja, Sarah Morgan, Sam Coe, the Adoring Fan, and I think that's it. So let's start from easiest to most complex. We have the Adoring Fan, which is, he's annoying, he's unhelpful, he has no interesting dialogue at all. He just exists purely to just suck up to you the whole time. Like, he'll just do whatever you want and listen to whatever you want, and he won't stop saying how amazing you are, because he's not a real character. He's not a real person. He is quite literally an Oblivion character. Not just in that it's making a reference to the Adoring Fan from Oblivion, an actual character in Oblivion. His character is designed like it's from Oblivion. Like, he's just brain dead, and he doesn't react to things, and he looks at you stupid, and he emotes wrong. He doesn't have any intelligent thing to say, and he's unhelpful, and he's just annoying. Just like Oblivion NPCs. It is a really faithful reference to the Adoring Fan from Oblivion. It's kind of cool. I hate it. I hate him so much. He's a faithful reference, but I hate him because he's too faithful and he's useless and annoying. Alright, whatever. And then we have Vasco. Frankly, one of the least interesting characters in the game, but the few sections where he actually has something interesting to say or he's relevant to the story, is really, really cool. Not only does Vasco have a really, really nice, amazing voice, just mwah. Robot voices are kind of hard to do well. Most of the time, they just sound like they're from cartoons, or really stupid, or, you know, just cartoonish in general. But this robot voice actually sounds pretty cool. Like, it sounds like a robot voice, but also it's not annoying to listen to. I just like it. Genuinely, the most interesting feature of this entire game that I didn't know about, and I was completely baffled by when I figured it out, was that if you happen to name your character something within the list of names that the voice actor for Vasco has recorded, because they've recorded thousands of names in Vasco's voice, the robot will say your name. It will call you by your name.
Captain Arya, greetings.
And it was baffling because, like, he showed up, I became the captain of his ship, and then I walk in there and he's like, "Hey, Captain," name. And I just sat there for like 15 minutes. It was the most baffling feature. It's the most baffling thing that's ever happened to me in a video game ever. It was so cool. I mean, it wore off and I stopped caring about it in the long run. But the novelty of it at the beginning, the first time it happened, it was frankly the most striking thing this game had to say, was the fact that this character can say your name, and not in some like terrible low quality like computer voice. The names are actually read by a human. And I didn't look this up. I changed my name to something else and then went back and then it said that name. And then I did it again several times and it would say the name every time. I couldn't pick a name that it couldn't say. It was really cool. And then I played with one of my friends and she had a name that isn't like a human name. It's not something you would normally name a sapien creature. It's just kind of a word. And so Vasco didn't say her name. And it was really disappointing because I also wanted to, you know, blow her mind and show her this stupid, funny robot that could say human names. And it just didn't work. And it was so disappointing. You have no idea how excited I was about this dumb, insignificant detail of this game. It was amazing.
I will answer your questions truthfully. Unlike you, I am incapable of lying.
We move on to Barrett. He's kind of a nice guy. All of it's just kind of him being a nice guy. He's a little too nice. The fact that you kind of show up with an artifact, he's so fascinated by it that he's like, here is this, as far as the player knows, this is the only ship owned by the Constellation faction. Now, obviously, these people move around the star system somehow, so they either have their own ships or they use a taxi service or whatever. But as far as you can tell, as the player, no one else has a ship. Nobody else flies around in ships. And you just fly away with it. And Vasco, you take Vasco too. Like this. God, I love him. This stupid robot. He's amazing. If this game was good, I would buy that stupid collector's edition with the giant Vasco statue. God, I just don't like this game. So I can't have Vasco because I'm not giving Bethesda $200 for a character that I really, really like from a game I really, really don't. That's frankly not going to happen. God, stop going on tangents. Why am I making so many tangents today? This must be annoying, but it's staying in because it's funny. So Barrett's side quest, follower quest, I don't remember it at all. I did every follower side quest. I just don't remember what his is. Also, I go to the, wiki for this game, and they still haven't written out what happens in the quest, so I can't look it up easily, and I'm not going to sit through another hour video of Starfield to figure out what it is again, because frankly, I don't want to hear about this game existing anymore. I just don't like it that much. I'm going to go back to playing Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind. It's just, no more tangents. Next one is Sarah Morgan. She was fine. She was really uninteresting. She's a scientist. I generally like smart women a lot and scientist-esque characters, and she has neither of those qualities. She doesn't seem particularly smart. She'll say another couple voice lines that imply that she's smart, but the game never shows you in any way, shape, or form that she is smart. She kind of doesn't do anything. You have two other scientist characters in Constellations, which are not followers. You have one that is like this religious slash linguist character that's like super smart and will decipher things and will teach you about religious history, really knowledgeable about a ton of things. And then you have this other like xenobiologist, which will like, I don't remember what the word is for like decoding like genomes and stuff like that. There's a specific word for it, but whatever, forgive me. So you'll bring her like tissue samples of things and she'll tell you some features of the living creature and like where it came from and what it's related to, and has knowledgeable, interesting things to say. And we'll show you it by including it in game features. So again, you can bring her things and she'll tell you about them. There's an interaction there where she studies something and shows you the fruits of her labor, right? Sarah Morgan does this not even once in the game. What kind of scientist she is, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea what she is. I remember specifically that she's supposed to be a scientist character. I just don't remember in what field, because she was so comedically uninteresting that I just couldn't care less about what she had to say. And much like Barrett, I just don't remember her side quests at all. I did it. I did do it. I could swear I did it. I just don't remember what it is, because just a boring character, and I just don't remember things that are boring like that. Then we have Sam Coe. He's a pretty interesting character. He's the stupid cowboy from Aquila City. The Coe family was the one that founded Aquila City, and thus the Freestar Collective. They're responsible for that hell. And he redeems himself by the fact that he wants nothing of the family fortune and wants absolutely nothing to do with the Freestar Collective or Aquila City or the Freestar Rangers. I forgot the name. What is it? Freestar Rangers. Yes. He wants nothing to do with any of that, and he just wants to escape his family and the stupid government and all the people that want to like hold him up as this like mythical creature, and he just hates all of it. So he kind of redeems himself. He's like a genuinely good person through his actions, not just on paper. He doesn't have the implication of depth. They show you the depth, they take action on the depth, and it has functional effects on the game world and story, right? Something rare for Bethesda, again, because most things are implied and not actually actioned upon. So he's a good character. I like Sam Coe a lot. His side quest is about finding his ex-wife, who left him because she's also a cowboy, and she's so much better at being a cowboy than he is that anyone around her is always in danger because she's always cowboying too hard and finding, you know, bandits and bringing them to justice and generally doing comedically cowboy western movie things all her life. And that's why Sam Coe has his daughter that he's tied to all the time, because he doesn't, well, they don't want the daughter to be around her because she just kind of gets into danger all the time. He does too, because he's still an annoying cowboy, but also his daughter, I don't remember what her name is. She's also interesting because you get to like see her like kind of grow up for like a little bit. And you have this interesting like minor side quest with her where you can bring her books and she'll tell you about them. She'll specifically ask you to bring her books and she'll like explain things about it, and it's so cool. And they're not like fake Bethesda books, like they're real books from the real world. It's kind of cool. Like you got a bunch of the classics, the American classics, because God forbid Bethesda use any culture other than American culture. And don't know, it's kind of cool. She has a lot of interesting things to say. Sam Coe is kind of the super emotional, like dad character. She's just kind of the super smart child character. It's cool. They have an interesting dynamic. Remember that they were tracking down the ex-wife, the mother, because she stopped being in contact with them. And I don't remember exactly why or what happened with that, but it was I liked it because I like the characters. They're good. And then we have the black sheep of the herd. We have Andreja. Andreja is the character I picked to go with because you get to the constellation and it's like, here's the 4 followers from the constellation faction, and you can only choose to take one with you at the beginning of the game. I guess you can also take Vasco, but Vasco can't do anything. Like, he'll help you with combat and fighting things. He's not really good at it because you can't equip him with armor and guns like you can with the other 4. He also doesn't really interact with dialogue a lot. Like, the other 4 will intercede in the middle of you talking with someone else to add things to the conversation like humans do. And the reason I picked Andreja is because she's so obviously different. She sticks out like a sore thumb. And the reason why, because you look at them, you have Barrett in his stupid spacesuit and normal clothing, and then you have Sarah Morgan in her like weird leather thing and jeans. And you have the Samco wearing, wait, is he wearing the same thing Sarah Morgan is? Why am I thinking of all 3 of them wearing the same thing? Whatever. They all look super generic, okay? They don't really stick out. You throw them into a crowd of people, you can tell that they look better because they're just put together well, but they don't stick out. To explain this tangent I'm going on, I have to go on another bigger tangent. The game has 3 major factions it references over and over and over because it's the 3 major countries in the game. You have the United Colonies and the Freestar Collective, and there's a third one, that being House Varun. So you have the United Colonies with its stainless steel and greens and blues in their motifs and designs. Then you have the Freestar Collective, which is all browns and yellows and gold. And then you have House Varun, which is like a black obsidian metal-ish color. I can't tell what it is exactly. It's just dark metal. And then purple in their motif. And this political faction, this entire country, is the 3rd signatory of the armistice. So they were part of the war. They were a major political force in the galaxy. And frankly, they're just not in the game. They're just not there. They don't exist. The reason why is because they all moved off to somewhere else, and it's kind of a secret. They hold no contact with the United Colonies or the Freestar Collective other than to uphold their armistice. Like, they have an embassy that they don't communicate with. Like, they put an embassy guy in the embassy, and then they just stop talking to him. So they're really not in contact with anyone. Every once in a while, they send spies. And these spies don't know how to get to House Varun from the other locations, because they use a completely different mapping system. So, like, for example, United Colonies centers the map of the world on a grid with coordinates, and 00 is New Atlantis. It's the center of the universe for them. Everything revolves around them. The Freestar Collective kind of doesn't care, I think. I don't remember exactly. And House Varun just has a whole separate thing. So they don't position their planets in the same system. So even if you knew the numbers that they positioned their system in, you don't know how that relates to the numbers in the United Colonies mapping system. So you do know how to navigate these 2 different maps, you just don't know where they are relative to each other. So you cannot find House Varun. No one knows, apparently. The United Colonies and the Freestar Collective are like right next to each other, so they intermingle a lot. You can trade between them. House Varun went off into the darkness, and nobody knows where they are. And as part of the main quest, you go through their embassy and you find out all of this stuff that I just told you. And most of it you can find out through play in the rest of the game. Like, there's hints and there's lore and stuff dropped all around the game about House Varun. But House Varun never shows up other than the embassy. And then you walk into the Constellation faction. And you look at Barrett, Sarah Morgan, and Samco, and you're like, these are normal, well-adjusted people. Then you look at Andreja, and she has weapons made of black metal, and her entire wardrobe is purple. You want to guess what the twist is here? Do you want to guess what her big secret is here? What could her secret possibly be here? One of the factions of the game is just completely missing, Their motif is black and purple, and they normally send religious zealot characters that are brainwashed all the way through, and they don't know how to get back to House Varun, and they stick out like a sore thumb because they don't know anything about the United Colonies and the Freestar Collective or the people around them. They don't understand the culture of normal people because they are a religious cult. And this character shows up, and the second I looked at her, I was like, yeah, you're a House Varun spy. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. That's the second I looked at her, I understood exactly what her entire storyline was going to be. I looked at her and I could see straight through her, like she was transparent. Okay? You stick out, you're different, you probably have some weird backstory, and then you play the rest of the game, and then you see the House Varun and their motifs and everything about them, and it's like, wow, okay. Assuming you're a normal person that lives in this universe, and you know about House Varun and what they look like and what they believe, because everyone knows what they look like and what they believe, right? Because they were the third signatory to the armistice. They were part of the giant war that affected the entire galaxy, right? Imagine World War II, but there were only 3 countries, right? You would absolutely know a ton about all 3 of them. Even if you've never been to there, you don't know anyone from there, you would have known from movies, from popular culture, from media, from propaganda, etc., right? And then you have this undercover spy that not just looks like they specifically belong to you, like they look like they're from House Varun, because they have Varun weapons, they have Varun motifs, they're in the color palette of House Varun, and they're really weird, they're super religious, and like, what do you want me to... Bethesda, you can't just do this. Bethesda has the subtlety of a sledgehammer, right? They're trying to write deep, interesting stories about characters into... They're trying to use, precision tools to write these fine, complex details. But Bethesda is doing it with a sledgehammer. And every single storyline is completely transparent. Now, you don't know what's going to happen in between the story, right? But every time you start a storyline, you know exactly where it's going. Bethesda designs all of their games around stereotypes. Everything about Bethesda games is stereotypes. If a character is part of a faction, they will exude the motifs and the beliefs of that faction. There are exceptions, but that's not how humans function. That's not how you write meaningful characters. Like, one of my friends made the argument that Bethesda does the Chekhov's gun thing, where like, if you put something in a scene, you have to use it. It's like in the Chekhov's gun example, it's a gun on a wall, so when you see the gun, you're like, oh, someone is going to use it. But you don't know why, you don't know how, you don't know against who, you don't know when. The problem with Bethesda is that everything is immediately transparent from the beginning. You know how everything is going to play out. Sure, you don't know that you're going to go on an extra side quest as the main story and divert from the actual story because they couldn't just make the story longer. They had to throw an extra smaller narrative questline to you because TikTok brain or something like that. But generally, you will start a questline and you know exactly where it's going, and it's immediately predictable because it's all functioning off of stereotypes, and it doesn't have any complex stories. It doesn't have any subtlety. It doesn't... Foreshadowing is something that Bethesda does not understand at all. They cannot do foreshadowing. They either tell you immediately and transparently everything about something, or they just don't, and you find out 700 hours later in a note you find in a cave somewhere. They just can't do complex characters tied into stories. They don't do that, and it's really frustrating. Her follower quest is called Divided Loyalties. It's you discovering her big secret twist, and that she's from House Varun. It's kind of a heart-wrenching story. where she has to make amends with her friends. When she initially came to the United Colonies space, she was part of some sort of mercenary group, I think, and they were defending something. I don't remember specifically what, and something attacks them, and she gets super scared. Maybe she's not a very good warrior, maybe she doesn't believe in the combat capabilities of her friends. I don't recall exactly why, like what her motivation for that was, but she runs. She just runs and abandons all of her friends and coworkers and stuff like that, and just runs. And so in this story, in this quest line, you are helping her make amends with the two people she made friends with. So you are tracking down these two people. You find that both of them made it out, but one of them, you follow his notes, you follow him to this random tiny planet. He lived in a tiny little house in the middle of nowhere, and he lived out his life and died of some disease or whatever. And he died recently before you tried to find him. So Andreja is distraught because one of two people is already dead, and she said she can't say sorry and make amends. And then you find the other one alive, but she wants nothing to do. And it's kind of, there's no good solution here. It's just kind of a really sad event. It was actually heart-wrenching. It was kind of sad because Andreja was kind of growing up from being a brainwashed religious zealot and becoming a real person. Seeing her trying to heal from that and trying to integrate into normal human society, and in the process of doing that, immediately getting kicked down and getting her insecurities just demolished by the fact that she can't make amends. Part of the quest is her speaking to her House Varun contact. Like, she has like a handler that mediates between the spies and House Varun, and he refuses to let her speak to the council of House Varun. And I don't remember exactly why. Oh, okay. This guy, this handler, happens to be the cause of why Andreja's friends died, of why that traumatic event happened to her. And so you're trying to talk to the council to get this guy in trouble because he killed your friends, right? But the problem here is that the only way to talk to the council is through him. So there's no good solution here. You have this moral dilemma of, do you kill him and potentially get her permanently exiled from her home, or do you spare him and try to find another way to contact the High Council, or do you let Andreja choose? Frankly, I think the first best choice was to let Andreja choose, because she's trying to become her own person instead of be a slave to her religion and her High Council, etc., etc. That kind of makes sense. You want her character to heal, you want to let her become her own person, right? So she has to take the decision into her own hands and do it herself, right? And the second choice, which I think would have been interesting, but Bethesda didn't write it into the story, is that you specifically know, as part of the main quest, another person that can contact the High Council, right? You know, the Varun ambassador in New Atlantis knows how to contact House Varun. They don't respond, but they are receiving the messages, right? He knows they're reading the messages, they're just not sending him back. So we have this other avenue of sending information. It's not like this would be hard to convince him. The House Varun ambassador knows Andreja by name. They know each other, right? They know that they're both working for House Varun. He knows what her mission is. He also specifically knows about this whole setup with the handler and all of that. But because these two sections of the game are not part of the same questline, Bethesda just didn't take the two puzzle pieces and put it together and give you the option and go to the ambassador and send a message to the High Council through the ambassador, right? That would have been the obvious choice. Ideally, she would make that choice herself, because you know that she knows the ambassador by name because you previously played through the main questline where she speaks directly to the ambassador, right? So you know this. She knows this. The character knows this. Everyone knows this, except for Bethesda, because they forgot. So the whole point of her quest ends with her trying to find a way to contact the High Council. And as I was finishing this quest, the only thing I could think of was how stupid this quest is, because the obvious solution is to send a message to the High Council that this guy is corrupt and he almost got you killed and killed all of your friends. Send the message through the ambassador to the High Council, and that's the real solution here, right? And my point in bringing up this in the DLC section is, I think, both this quest about Andreja and the fact that House Varun is completely devoid from this game, like they're just missing. I think the DLC is going to revolve around House Varun and Andreja specifically, because she has much more depth. All the other characters, their stories start and end, and there are no implications of anything else, right? You know what their character archetypes are. You know what their stereotypes are, right? Andreja has so much more depth to her because she's tied to this giant political intrigue, which none of the other characters are, right? You don't meet anyone else from House Varun. There are exactly 3 people in the game tied to House Varun, and they all revolve around Andreja, right? And House Varun. Because the 2 characters there exist purely for you and Andreja to contact House Varun, and no other reason, right? So, I don't know, that seems pretty cool. I like Andreja a lot. I think her character has a lot more to say in the future, because there are many things that are implied, but they're not part of stereotypes. Like, you don't know exactly what's going on with her. And also, I'd like to point out that something that Bethesda never does is give you unique game assets in locations if they're not tied to something else, right? You're not going to go into a building and that be the only place you're going to find all of those super unique custom assets in. The House Varun embassy is covered from head to toe in technology, in plants, and architecture from House Varun that you don't see anywhere else in the game, from art pieces, a whole bunch of things. I mean, it's an embassy. It's exactly what you would expect. And I don't think Bethesda would make all of these custom assets for a single location tied to a single quest, right? They don't do that. So the obvious answer to why they put in all that effort to make all these assets is because they're going to use them in the DLC, one of the DLCs. It's obvious. There's no other answer to why they did all that work. I would like to recommend other games you could play instead. If you like the open world sandbox kind of gameplay, but very light on the story, but there's actually things to do in the sandbox and you can build things, play No Man's Sky. It's really cool because it's one of the few games where you can actually traverse from space to planets seamlessly, and then you can also jump to other star systems seamlessly. There's no transition screens. There's nothing to stop you from just playing the game. If you like realism in your spaceships and you like things that take time instead of just instant gratification, my recommendation is Star Citizen. You can jump in ships from a station. Like you have an actual character model that can walk around, which is rare for space games. You get in a ship, you fly out, and you can just go everywhere without warping. Like you can, if you see a planet in the distance or a star, you can just hold down W or forward on your joystick. You'll get there eventually. It'll take forever, but you can do it, and that's really cool. The part that actually affects the player is in the warping. So like, for example, if you have to warp from a star system to another, it's not going to take a No Man's Sky 2 seconds. It's not going to give you a loading screen either. It's going to let you sit in that warp tunnel for several minutes. And if you jump far enough, you will potentially take hours to get there. Now, that's not a very engaging gameplay, but if what you're looking for is realism, that's really cool. You can fly to the other side of the universe to like drop off some loot or something, and in the meantime of you jumping there, you can do a whole bunch of other things. It's again, it's not fun. I wouldn't sit through hours of nothing happening just so I can manage my inventory and figure out what I'm going to sell and where I'm going to sell it, etc., etc. But it's a really cool feature. I would also like to point out that in Star Citizen, there are two downsides. You can't buy ships in the game. They all cost real money. So you can buy into the game, you get a free 2 or 3 ships, if I recall, and then every other ship you have to pay real money for. And the second part is that Star Citizen isn't really a game right now. It's kind of just a tech demo. So there's not much to do. Like the game economy isn't very functional. There's not much to do in the game other than space combat, which is really good, and space races, which are really good, and just everything about spaceships is amazing. The rest of the game just isn't in there. If you prefer a game with actual game in it, and you like playing multiplayer with other players specifically, like every other game I'm about to list, you can play EVE Online. Now, there are very big limitations. For one, it's that you can't exit your ship. Like, you don't have a player model, you're just a ship. And when your ship explodes, you eject, you're like in a little pod, but you don't have a character. I've played this game a lot. It's very cool. It's very bombastic. You see those videos of like 8,000 ships fighting in a single battle with like 20, 30 Titans, were the biggest ship type that cost, you know, $50,000 each in like collected in-game resources. People don't pay $50,000 for those ships. Hopefully, dear God. And you can fight over resources, and like factions can build space stations to say they own this location. They can build banks, casinos, and fight over the economy and fight over taxes and stuff like that. It's so cool how the guilds and factions and all of that interact. But it is a very economy-based game. If you want to play this game, you're gonna have to like, and I mean like, making Excel spreadsheets.
You can enhance your EVE Online experience with the upcoming free add-in for Microsoft Excel, which will be available in the Microsoft Store.
If you like being a merchant, and you like playing those games like Star Sector, where if you enjoy games like that where you have to figure out how to break the economy, and you like multiplayer and dealing with guild politics and all that nonsense, play EVE Online. It's a good game. You like more of a single player game with more story and more things you can do other than just interact with other players and nothing else, Elite Dangerous. It's still technically an MMO. You can still interact with other players. They're still there on the map. You see them, you can interact with them, you can join guilds, blah, blah, blah. But it's not as multiplayer centric. You can still play the game because there's a game there. If you like Bethesda games, but you haven't played some of their other games, go do that. My first suggestion is play Skyrim. An amazing game. I have 8,000 hours in it. I'll make a review of it eventually. But it's great. It does everything I like and none of the things I don't like. My second suggestion is go play Oblivion. Like, everyone looks like a potato person. And the dialogue is a little wonky. Like, that's why Oblivion memes about NPCs are so pervasive, is because it's comedic genius, the kind of dialogue this game has. It's bad, but its overall lore and story is really cool. Every time you interact with an NPC, it's funny because of the specific way it's bad in, and it's just very deep. It does a lot of things better than the older games. It does a lot of things better than the newer games. My third suggestion, although very dated, you really have to like RPGs with dice throwing mechanics and games of chance every time you try to hit something, play Morrowind. The other 4 Elder Scrolls games on PC, I mean, you can try them, but unless you want to go back to the days of playing Doom, you're gonna have a hard time. Mind you, Doom, before we had mouse and keyboard. You cannot play those games with a mouse. I think they remade 2 in Unity, and you can play that with mouse. Go try that out if you're interested. But that's a mod. I would be reviewing it because a mod Skyrim would be the best game ever made, and it's absolutely not that. If you like the gunplay more, and the cowboy stuff, and the nuclear apocalypse, and the 50s, go play Fallout. New Vegas is really good. It's a very different game than 3 and 4, because it's literally not made by Bethesda Studios. Now, out of all those things, if what you liked the most was the followers and nothing else from Bethesda games, if you don't like the story, if you don't care about any other feature of the games, you just like the followers and you would like them to be more expressive and interact with you more and have better conversations and better voice acting, that play Baldur's Gate 3. This game is amazing. I don't care what the story is. I don't care how the combat is played. I don't care how the economy works. That game is absolutely designed around your interactions with your followers. Like, you will spend like 20-30 hours playing the actual game, and you will spend hundreds of hours just doing all of the dialogue lines with Asteria because he's great. He has really deep, complex interactions. You get moral quandaries most other games don't have. You have a lot of choices too. You can choose different characters. There's not like one person that's good, or 4. In this game there's like 10. I don't remember the exact number, but I remember there being like a dozen or something like that. Characters in Baldur's Gate 3 are so much more deep and complex than I've seen in any other game ever. They have more layers to them in terms of communication than any game I've ever seen before. It's very rare for games to have, you know, facial expressions that always make sense. And it's not just like, oh, this is the angry face, or this is the happy face, or whatever. They actually have like minor twitches of the eye, and like how they move their lip like a centimeter. You wouldn't notice if you're not paying attention, but if you're really paying attention to their face, you can understand what they feel, just like normal humans. And it's this case of there's more to communication than just dialogue, than just the words they say and how they say them. They have actual expression beyond that, and it's really engaging. If you like the followers from Bethesda games, and you like how they react to the game world, and they're relevant to the story, and they add things to the game instead of just sitting there and being an addendum to your combat, you should play Dragon Age. The whole series, every game is good. The older ones are a bit dated. I would start with Inquisition. It's just the newest, most up-to-date one. People seem to dislike it, but I liked it a lot, and I think it's very accessible. If you like grand narrative stories, and also like followers and their interactions with the game world and story, but you still like space specifically, then play Mass Effect. The 2 older games are very dated, they're hard to get into. If you don't know anything about the series, start with Mass Effect 3 and play the Legendary Edition. It has additions that make the game run better, it looks better, etc, etc. It has actual improvements. If you still like the BioWare depth, but you like robots still, I recommend you play Anthem. Oh wait, you can't. Okay, well in that case, play Titanfall 2. It's a very different kind of game than all of the ones I just suggested. It is a shooter first. It will feel exactly like Call of Duty, but you have big robots that have emotions and talk to you and have nice voices.
Copy that, pilot.
Now, if you've already played Titanfall and you like it, or you want to try other games like this, and you still like interesting talking robots, but you also like space, and you also like something completely foreign to Bethesda, something called Spectacle, play the best Call of Duty. No, I don't play multiplayer.
That's all right, Ethan.
Ethan, you're with Lieutenant Reyes. Yes, sir. Spark it, Fever.
Copy. Look what they did to us, Reyes.
Let's go get him, son.
To all available craft, the Retribution is in pursuit, but we are losing ground. We need to leave atmosphere now.
1-2, copy. Let's go get him.
Retribution, this is the Eclipse. Trailing your starboard.
Scars, fold in. We're going upstairs.
Pitching 90 for horizontal thrust. All ahead full.
Go fight.
Nominal gains. Going through 50,000. Atmosphere drag acceptable. Stand by for redirect. Vector 10 hours, 16 minutes. Fire at will, fire at will.
You got eyes on this, Reyes?
Affirmative.
And this concludes my Starfield review / analysis. In the future, I would like to collect more data and statistics and story details and not, forget details. Because the problem I had with this video is that I was motivated to make this video because I hated this game so much. So I had played through the entire game and finished the game, and once I finished the game, I decided then I have to do my best to as loudly proclaim as possible that this game is garbage to everyone that can possibly listen. And this was the best outlet to do that, frankly. Hated this game so much that it motivated me to start a YouTube channel, right? I think it's a very outdated game. All of its systems are from 2010. This game should have came out when Skyrim did, and Skyrim should have come out when Oblivion did, and Oblivion should have come out when Morrowind did, etc, etc. All of the games Bethesda make are too late. They're all good games. They just take so long to make them that they have nothing interesting to say by the time they come out. Other games by better companies do what they do better. But there's one thing you can't beat Bethesda on, and it is the sheer scale of their games. The fact that you can, with the exception of Starfield, walk in any direction, get lost, find a random quest, and that tiny quest in the middle of nowhere will somehow tie into the main quest, to the narrative, and fit in the world and make sense. I think Starfield fails spectacularly in producing a better game than any other game they've made before, because they took a ton of features mostly from Fallout, and they took a couple features from the Elder Scrolls, and they put them together and they put them in space, and they didn't improve on any of the features. As a matter of fact, a ton of them didn't make sense in this game. Like, they had the context in their original game, but when you take them into Starfield, they no longer make sense because they don't tie into the game story. They don't tie into the game world. They don't tie into the game economy, into the game systems. They're just kind of there. And so not only did they not improve on any of the features they took from the previous series, most of them are worse. All of the new systems this game makes are all really bad. None of them are good. There are only 3 points that this game does well. It is the narrative, the overall, narrative and world building, which isn't very deep, but is very wide. Bethesda's very good at that. They've done that with every game. It's still here. The second point is the followers. Again, there are 3 other game series that do it much better than Bethesda does, but those are only 3 other series. Bethesda is in 4th place. And the third point is, honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this, the stupid robot. I loved Vasco so much. I wish he had more to say. I wish he had a bigger part in the story. I wish you could have him interact with the world more than what he did, because that was kind of the high point of this game, was right at the beginning of the game when you meet this stupid robot and he says your stupid custom name. This game is a baffling peak of a really high point that gives you hope for the game. You have really interesting dialogue, characters that emote in ways that I've only ever seen in another game, which is Baldur's Gate 3. They emote in ways where you can understand what they're saying even if you mute the game and you look at them and how they use their mannerisms, how they move about. You understand what they're trying to convey, right? Because there are more layers to dialogue than just the words you are saying. And it hits you with Vasco, the stupid robot that can say your name, and it fills you with hope. Even the cutscene where you touch the artifact is really cool. And then that's the only thing this game has to say, with the exception of specific details which absolutely will tie into DLCs. Everything in between the beginning of the game and the potential DLC tie-ins is completely meaningless and not worth your time or your money. My recommendation for this game is read the wiki and watch a playthrough of the important parts. And don't play this game. Just don't.